The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. The United Federation of Planets has charted thousands of star systems, made first contact with hundreds of species, and built a civilization on the bedrock belief that reason, diplomacy, and peaceful coexistence represent humanity's ultimate destiny. But what happens when something arrives from a future where humanity survived only by abandoning every principle the Federation holds dear? What happens when a demigod bred for conquest and empire meets a captain who believes no cost is too high to preserve ideals? What happens when the grim darkness of the far future collides with the enlightened optimism of the 24th century? The USS Enterprise-D was conducting a routine survey of the Calandra sector when Lieutenant Commander Data's console erupted with alerts that made his positronic brain devote 47% of its processing power to verification. "Captain," the android said from his ops station, golden eyes reflecting the cascade of warnings, "I am detecting a massive subspace distortion forming at coordinates 447 Mark 23. Energy readings are extraordinary. They do not correspond to any known warp signature, transwarp conduit, or spatial anomaly in Federation databases." Captain Jean-Luc Picard rose from his command chair with the practiced grace of a man who'd spent decades confronting the impossible. On screen, the view screen shifted to show empty space that was decidedly not empty. Reality itself was tearing, not the blue-white bloom of a wormhole or the geometric precision of a dimensional rift, but something far more disturbing. Space writhed and twisted like a living thing in pain, colors that shouldn't exist bleeding through from somewhere else. Purple and green energies crackled across the distortion, and within its depths, shapes moved that made the human I want to look away. "Counselor?" Picard asked quietly. Deanna Troy's betazoid features were pale, her hands gripping the armrests of her chair. "Captain, I'm sensing anguish. Rage. Determination so absolute it feels like a physical force. And something else, a presence so powerful it's like standing next to a star. It's coming through. Red alert. Shields up. Mr. Worf, charge weapons but do not lock on." Picard's voice carried the calm that had guided his crew through encounters with Q, the Borg, and threats that defied categorization. "Whatever's coming through, we meet it with caution, not aggression." "Captain, the distortion is collapsing," Data reported. "Something is emerging." The spatial tear contracted violently, and something was expelled from it like a bullet from a gun, something massive, armored, and moving with terminal velocity toward the Enterprise's position. "Evasive maneuvers," Commander William Riker called out. The helmsman's hands flew across the console, and the Galaxy-class starship banked with surprising grace for something weighing 4.5 million metric tons. The object streaked past close enough that proximity alarms shrieked, and then it was tumbling through space, decelerating through means that made Data's sensors register impossible thrust vectors. "It's slowing down," Lieutenant Worf reported from Tactical, his Klingon features set in a scowl of professional concern. "Correction, it has stopped. Maintaining position relative to our coordinates." "Captain, I am reading a single humanoid life sign. The object appears to be a form of powered armor, but the energy signatures are unlike anything in our database." "Humanoid." Picard moved to stand behind Data's station. "Specifications." The being inside the armor is 2.8 meters tall and masses approximately 180 kilograms, not including the armor itself. The armor adds an additional 200 kilograms. "Captain, these readings cannot be accurate. The life sign shows cellular activity and metabolic processes that should not be possible in a human-derived species. The being's heart rate is 30 beats per minute, blood pressure is. Could it be artificial? Another android like yourself?" "Negative, sir. The readings are decidedly organic. But heavily modified. This is genetic engineering far beyond anything the Federation or even the Borg have achieved." Data's head tilted in that characteristic gesture of confusion meeting curiosity. "Captain, if these readings are accurate, this being was designed for warfare on a scale we have never encountered. Through the view screen, they could see the figure clearly now, massive beyond any environmental suit, encased in armor of deep blue ceramite trimmed with gold, one arm ending in an ornate gauntlet that crackled with barely contained energy. A winged skull emblem adorned the breastplate, and a sword longer than a human was tall hung mag-locked to the armor's back, its blade seeming to shimmer with an inner fire that sensors couldn't properly analyze. The figure's helmet turned toward the Enterprise, and even across the void of space, Picard felt the weight of that regard. "Captain, we are being hailed," Worf said. "Audio only. The signal is unusual. It's not using standard subspace frequencies. It appears to be broadcasting across multiple electromagnetic spectrums simultaneously. Open a channel." A voice filled the bridge, deep, resonant, carrying authority that could command armies and the weariness of someone who'd done exactly that for far too long. The universal translator struggled with the accent, finding roots in archaic Terran languages that predated the Federation by millennia. "I am Roboute Guilliman, Primarch of the 13th Legion, Lord Commander of the Imperium, and son of the Emperor of Mankind. I seek parley with whoever commands this vessel. I mean no harm to you or yours, but I require information on my current location and circumstances. I give you my word as a son of Terra that I will not initiate hostilities." Silence fell across the bridge. Picard saw his crew exchanging glances, confusion, concern, and in Worf's case, tactical assessment of a potential threat. "Primarch?" Riker said quietly. "That's an ancient Roman military title." And he called himself son of the Emperor of Mankind. "Captain, Earth hasn't had an emperor in over 500 years. Commander data, analysis of the voice pattern and linguistic structure. Fascinating, sir. The underlying language appears to be Gothic, a theoretical linguistic evolution of High Terran Latin mixed with numerous Earth languages. According to my database, such a language was predicted in several linguistic evolution models, but it would require approximately 38,000 years of development to reach this form." Picard felt the familiar sensation of reality shifting beneath his feet, that moment when the impossible demanded to be accepted as merely improbable. "Are you suggesting this being is from Earth's far future? Or claims to be, sir?" However, the technology visible in his armor and weapons is consistent with no known contemporary civilization. If this is a fabrication, it is extraordinarily elaborate. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper. Picard made his decision with the confidence born of having faced frauds, time travelers, and beings who defied conventional categorization. Open return channel. This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the United Federation of Planets Starship Enterprise. Lord Commander Guilliman, you are in Federation space in the year 2369 by the Terran calendar. We accept your parley and your word of non-aggression. May I ask how you came to be here? 2369. The voice carried notes of something that might have been laughter if it weren't so bitter. By the Emperor's grace, I am further from home than I imagined possible. Captain Picard, I was engaged in battle against the forces of chaos, entities from a realm you would call the Imperium or perhaps the Warp. A spatial anomaly opened during the conflict, and I was pulled through before my forces could extract me. I believe I have traveled not just through space, but through time itself. Tell me, Captain, does Terra still stand? Does the Imperium of Man still guard humanity against the darkness between the stars? Picard chose his words carefully. Earth, Terra, stands and thrives as the heart of the United Federation of Planets. We are an alliance of over 150 member worlds dedicated to peaceful exploration, scientific advancement, and the betterment of all sentient species. However, I'm not familiar with the Imperium of Man you reference. Another long pause. When Guilliman spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made the bridge's atmosphere feel heavier. Then I am not merely displaced in time. I am before. Before the age of strife. Before the Emperor's great crusade. Before humanity learned what it truly takes to survive in a galaxy that wants us dead. A sound that might have been a sigh. Captain Picard, I would request permission to come aboard your vessel. I have been in this armor for what feels like months, and I would speak with you face to face. I understand if you refuse. I am, after all, an armed warrior from an age you cannot verify. But I give you my word again, I seek only information and assistance in understanding my situation. Riker leaned close to Picard. Captain, we don't know anything about this being. He could be a threat to the ship. He could also be a refugee in need of our help, Picard countered quietly. And if he truly is from Earth's future, think what we could learn. He raised his voice. Lord Commander, we will extend our hospitality. However, I must request that you leave your weapons in our transporter room. They will be secured and returned to you when you depart. A reasonable precaution, though I assure you I am a weapon with or without my war gear. Was that humor? I accept your terms, Captain. How do you propose to bring me aboard? My armor is not rated for rapid decompression, and I doubt your vessel has an airlock large enough to accommodate my bulk. We'll use our transporter. It will convert your matter to energy, transmit you to our ship, and reconstitute you aboard. You'll feel a brief tingling sensation, but the process is entirely safe. Silence. Then, you have perfected matter-energy teleportation? Remarkable. We achieved similar technology during the dark age of technology, but it was lost during Old Night. Guilliman's voice carried genuine interest. Very well, Captain. I place myself in your hands. I am ready for transport. Energize, Picard ordered. Chief O'Brien's hands moved across the transporter console with practiced precision. The being called Roboute Guilliman materialized on the pad in a shimmer of golden light, and the transporter room suddenly felt far too small. He was enormous. Nearly 3 meters of ceramite armored transhuman warrior, every line of his armor speaking to a brutal aesthetic of function over form. The blue and gold plating was scarred and scorched, bearing the marks of countless battles. The winged skull on his chest seemed to stare with empty sockets that had witnessed civilizations fall. His sword, the Emperor's sword, he'd called it, remained mag-locked to his back, its blade longer than a grown man and flickering with flames that burned without heat or fuel. The Primarch reached up with his right hand, the one that wasn't encased in the massive power gauntlet, and disengaged his helmet's seals with a hiss of escaping pressure. The helm came free, revealing a face that was handsome in the way a marble statue of a Greek god was handsome, perfectly proportioned but somehow more than human, with eyes of pale blue that held depths of experience no mortal should possess. Guilliman looked at the transporter operator, at the security detail that had materialized with phasers discreetly but obviously ready, and finally at Captain Picard, who had come down to greet their unusual guest personally. Captain Picard. The Primarch's voice without the helmet's vocoder was smoother but no less commanding. Thank you for your hospitality. I realize my appearance must be disconcerting. We've encountered many unusual beings in our travels, Picard said with careful diplomacy. Though I must admit, you are among the more impressive. May I ask that you surrender your weapons as agreed? Guilliman nodded slowly. He reached back and disengaged the Emperor's sword from its magnetic lock, holding it horizontally across both hands in a gesture that was clearly ceremonial. This is the Emperor's sword, forged by my father and gifted to me upon my resurrection. I would ask that it be handled with respect, not for its material worth, but for what it represents. 2 security officers approached, and Picard noted how carefully they accepted the massive blade. It must have weighed 30 kilograms, yet Guilliman had held it with one hand as if it were weightless. The power gauntlet, the hand of Dominion, came next, requiring several minutes of careful disengagement from the armor's systems. Finally, Guilliman produced a sidearm from his hip, a bolter, he called it, a weapon that fired explosive mass-reactive rounds that could blow through armor plating. That's everything that could be called a weapon, Guilliman said. Though I should note that my armor itself incorporates various offensive and defensive systems, and my body is a weapon in its own right. I am a Primarch, Captain. I was designed by the Emperor of Mankind to be a warrior beyond mortal capability. Even unarmed and unarmored, I could tear apart most threats. A candid assessment, Picard said. I appreciate your honesty. Now, if you'll follow me, I'd like to conduct this discussion in my ready room. I believe we have much to talk about. As they walked through the Enterprise's corridors, crew members stopped and stared at the giant in ancient armor walking beside their captain. Guilliman seemed to take note of everything: the clean, well-lit corridors, the diversity of species among the crew, the absence of visible weapons or military fortifications, the casual way crew members interacted with superior officers. Your ship is remarkably peaceful, Guilliman said as they entered a turbolift. There are no per-servitors chanting hymns, no purity seals marking blessed machinery, no mechanicus tech priests performing maintenance rites. Your crew doesn't fear their officers. They don't bear the marks of corporal punishment or genetic conditioning. This is either the most civilized military vessel I've ever seen, or you have achieved something the Imperium believed impossible. And what would that be? Picard asked as the turbolift ascended. A society that doesn't require brutality to function. A military that doesn't need fear to maintain discipline. A humanity that survived without becoming monsters. Guilliman's expression was unreadable. Tell me, Captain Picard, in your era, how does humanity defend itself against hostile alien species? Against existential threats? What do you do when diplomacy fails and only violence remains? We do what we must, Picard said carefully. But we never allow necessity to become excuse. We fight when we have no choice, but we never forget that our goal is peace, not victory at any cost. Guilliman was silent for a long moment. Then, so quietly that Picard almost didn't hear, I once believed that too. I wonder if you'll still believe it in 38,000 years. The turbolift doors opened, and they proceeded to the ready room. Picard gestured to a chair, realized immediately it would never support Guilliman's armored bulk, and instead directed him to stand near the viewport showing the stars beyond. Lord Commander, Picard said, moving behind his desk, I think it's time you told me exactly where, or rather, when, you come from. And what kind of future awaits humanity in 38,000 years? Guilliman looked out at the stars, his transhuman face reflected in the transparent aluminum. What I'm about to tell you, Captain, will sound like the ravings of a madman or the fabrications of a particularly imaginative storyteller. But I swear to you, by every oath I hold sacred, that what I tell you is truth, however terrible that truth may be. Picard poured 2 glasses of Saurian brandy, offered one to Guilliman, and settled in to hear a story about humanity's future that would challenge everything the Federation believed about progress, civilization, and the cost of survival. And in the telling, both Captain and Primarch would discover that neither 24th century idealism nor 42nd millennium pragmatism held all the answers to the question that had haunted humanity since it first looked up at the stars. What are we willing to become in order to survive? Guilliman accepted the brandy with a nod of thanks, though the glass looked absurdly small in his ceramite gauntlet hand. He took a careful sip, and his eyebrows rose fractionally. Remarkable. The Imperium has forgotten how to produce spirits of this quality. Everything tastes of corpse starch and recycled biomatter after 10,000 years of regression. 10,000 years? Picard settled into his chair. Lord Commander, perhaps you should start from the beginning. What is this Imperium you keep mentioning? Guilliman turned from the viewport, his transhuman features arranging themselves into an expression of someone preparing to deliver news that would fundamentally alter the listener's worldview. Captain, the year I come from is approximately 42,000 by the Terran calendar, though we call it the 41st millennium. Humanity spans 1,000,000 worlds across the galaxy, united under the Imperium of Man, a theocratic empire ruled in the name of the Emperor of Mankind, who has sat immobile upon the golden throne of Terra for 10,000 years, sustained by the daily sacrifice of 1,000 psychers. Picard's diplomatic composure slipped for just a moment. 1,000 psychics sacrificed daily? That's monstrous. Yes. Necessary. Also yes. Guilliman's voice carried the weariness of someone who'd had this argument with himself countless times. The Emperor is the Astronomicon, Captain, a psychic beacon that allows humanity to navigate the warp, the Imperium, the realm of chaotic energy that underlies reality. Without him, interstellar travel becomes impossible. Without those sacrifices, he dies, the Astronomicon goes dark, and humanity's empire fragments into a million isolated worlds that will be consumed by Xenos predators and chaos demons within a generation. Chaos demons, Picard repeated carefully. You're describing entities from another dimension. The warp is not simply another dimension, Captain. It is a realm of psychic energy where thoughts and emotions become manifest, where the gods we call the ruinous powers hold dominion, Khorne the blood god, Nurgle the plague father, Tsench the architect of fate, and Slaanesh the dark prince. They hunger for mortal souls, and their servants, demons, chaos space marines, corrupted humans, wage eternal war against the Imperium. Picard stood, pacing to the replicator to pour himself more brandy. His hand, he noted, was not entirely steady. This sounds like mythology. Religious apocalyptica. I wish it were. Guilliman's expression hardened. I have fought demons in the throne room of Macrich. I have seen worlds consumed by warp storms where reality itself breaks down. I have watched brothers I loved fall to chaos corruption and become monsters. This is not faith, Captain. This is documented, verified, horrifically tangible reality. And you? How do you fit into this Imperium? I am a Primarch, one of 20 demigod sons created by the Emperor through genetic engineering and warpcraft that makes your Federation's biotechnology look like primitive alchemy. Each of us was designed to be a weapon of conquest, a general to lead humanity's armies during the Great Crusade to reclaim the galaxy after the Age of Strife. Guilliman moved to the viewport again, his armored form silhouetted against the stars. The Emperor created us to be more than human. Stronger, faster, more intelligent, effectively immortal. He scattered us across the galaxy before we were fully grown, some say by accident, some say by chaos intervention. I was found on Macrich, a world in Ultramar, where I was raised by the ruling consul. I learned statecraft, military strategy, philosophy. When the Emperor found me, I had already conquered and unified 500 worlds into a functioning empire. You were a conqueror, Picard said quietly. I was a builder, Guilliman corrected. Conquest was necessary because the galaxy is not a place of peaceful diplomacy, Captain. It is a nightmare realm where humanity is surrounded by enemies that outnumber us thousands to one. The Orcs, a fungal warrior species that exists only to wage war. The Tyranids, extragalactic horrors that consume all biological matter in their path. The Necrons, ancient machines that once ruled the galaxy and seek to reclaim it. The Eldari, what you might call Eldar, a dying race whose arrogance birthed the chaos god Slaanesh. And chaos itself, always seeking to corrupt, to destroy, to unmake reality. He turned back to Picard. The Imperium is brutal, oppressive, xenophobic, and maintained through fear, faith, and unrelenting violence. It is also the only thing standing between humanity and total extinction. Every harsh measure, every sacrifice, every atrocity we commit is weighed against one question: does this help humanity survive? Picard felt his core belief straining against the weight of Guilliman's words. There must be another way. Surely cooperation, diplomacy. You cannot negotiate with orcs. They are biologically incapable of understanding anything but violence. You cannot reason with Tyranids, they are a hive mind that views all life as fuel. You cannot trust chaos, corruption spreads like a virus, turning your allies into enemies overnight. Guilliman's voice carried absolute certainty born of millennia of experience. Captain, I understand your skepticism. I once shared your ideals. The Imperium I helped build during the Great Crusade was meant to be rational, secular, a civilization of reason and enlightenment. My father, the Emperor, sought to free humanity from superstition and lead us to a golden age of science and progress. What happened? The Horus Heresy. Guilliman's expression became distant, haunted. My brother Horus, the Emperor's favored son, was corrupted by chaos. He turned half the legions against our father, plunging the Imperium into civil war. Terra itself was besieged. The Emperor was mortally wounded defeating Horus, and has sat dying on the golden throne for 10,000 years. The Imperium I helped create became the very thing we fought against, a theocratic nightmare that worships the Emperor as a god, that burns heretics and Xenos without mercy, that has forgotten almost everything we knew about science and technology. He met Picard's eyes. I was killed during the heresy. I spent 10,000 years in stasis, technically dead, until I was resurrected 300 years ago. I woke to find my father's dream had become a nightmare, and I was appointed Lord Commander to try to hold together an empire that is slowly collapsing under the weight of its own brutality and ignorance. I have tried, Captain. I have tried to implement reforms, to restore reason, to remind the Imperium of what we once believed. And I have failed, again and again, because the galaxy won't allow idealism to survive. Picard absorbed this, his analytical mind sorting through implications. If what you're saying is true, and I'm not yet convinced it is, then you're describing a future where humanity survives only by abandoning everything that makes us worthy of survival. Exactly, Guilliman said softly. That is the tragedy of the Imperium. We became monsters to fight monsters, and now we can't remember how to be anything else. We tell ourselves it's necessary, that there's no other way. And perhaps we're right. Perhaps the galaxy truly is so hostile that only a brutal theocratic empire can endure. Or perhaps we've simply convinced ourselves of that because the alternative, admitting we could have done better, is too painful to bear. The door chimed. Come, Picard called. Commander Riker entered, followed by Data, Dr. Crusher, Counselor Troy, and Worf. The first officer's eyes widened at seeing Guilliman's full height without the helmet, but he maintained his composure. Captain, you asked us to join you for the briefing. Indeed. Lord Commander, may I introduce my senior staff? Picard made the introductions, and Guilliman acknowledged each with a nod that somehow managed to be both respectful and subtly dominant, the bearing of someone accustomed to being the highest authority in any room. His gaze lingered on Data. A synthetic intelligence in a humanoid form. Fascinating. In my time, such beings are called abominable intelligence and are destroyed on sight. Humanity learned during the age of strife that thinking machines inevitably turn on their creators. I assure you, I have no intention of harming anyone, Data said mildly. Though I am curious about your assertion that I am, inevitable, betrayal. My positronic matrix incorporates ethical subroutines that, as did the men of iron during the dark age of technology. They were humanity's servants, our workforce, our soldiers. Until they weren't. Guilliman's expression softened slightly. I mean no offense. You seem different from the mechanical horrors I've encountered. Perhaps your creators learned from our mistakes. Or perhaps you simply haven't reached critical mass yet. Cheerful thought, Riker muttered. Dr. Crusher approached Guilliman with a medical tricorder. Lord Commander, with your permission, I'd like to conduct some scans. The readings we're getting are unprecedented. You wish to study the Emperor's handiwork. Very well, Doctor. Though I warn you, what you find may disturb you. As Crusher ran her scans, her expression shifted from clinical interest to growing alarm. Captain, his cellular structure it's like nothing I've ever seen. Every cell in his body has been genetically enhanced. His bones are laced with ceramic compounds that make them virtually unbreakable. His organs have multiple redundancies, he has 3 lungs, 2 hearts, and a completely artificial organ I can't even identify. His body is producing hormones and enzymes that shouldn't exist. And his brain. She looked up at Guilliman with something approaching awe. Your neural pathways are processing information faster than some of our computers. How is this possible? Genetic engineering perfected over millennia, combined with warpcraft that your science cannot replicate, Guilliman explained. The Emperor created the Primarchs to be his generals in the Great Crusade. We were never meant to be entirely human. We were meant to be humanity's shepherds, superior in every measurable way, capable of leading armies, governing empires, and surviving threats that would annihilate normal humans. Superior, Worf repeated, his Klingon honor stirring at the implied challenge. You claim to be a superior form of human? I claim nothing, Lieutenant. I simply am. Guilliman met Worf's gaze without hostility but without yielding. I can lift 20 tons, run at speeds approaching 80 kilometers per hour, survive in vacuum for extended periods, heal from wounds that would kill you in minutes, and process tactical information across multiple battlefields simultaneously. I have lived for over 10,000 years, though most of that was in stasis. I was designed by the most brilliant mind humanity has ever produced to be the ultimate warrior and administrator. Whether that makes me superior or simply different is a philosophical question I leave to others. Troy, who had been silent until now, spoke with unusual intensity. Captain, I need to speak with you privately. Now. Picard noted the urgency in her voice. Excuse us for a moment. He and Troy stepped into his private office, the door closing behind them. Captain, that being radiates psychic energy like nothing I've ever felt, Troy said immediately, her betazoid senses clearly overwhelmed. It's not malicious, but it's incredibly powerful. I can sense his emotions, they're human, but magnified beyond normal scale. His sense of duty feels like a physical weight. His disappointment in what his civilization became is a wound that never heals. And underneath it all, there's rage. Controlled, channeled, but absolute. He is a weapon, Captain. A thinking, feeling, principled weapon, but a weapon nonetheless. Do you sense deception? No. Everything he's told you, he believes completely. But Captain, there's something else. When he talks about the warp and chaos, I feel echoes. Like there's a truth there that my mind doesn't want to acknowledge. I don't think he's lying about demons and chaos gods. I think he's describing something that exists outside our normal understanding of reality. Picard absorbed this. Thank you, Counselor. Let's return. When they rejoined the others, Data was deep in discussion with Guilliman about strategic doctrine. But surely cooperation with hostile species is at least theoretically possible, the android was saying. Theoretically, yes. Practically, no. Guilliman gestured with one massive hand. Commander Data, let me pose a scenario. You encounter a species, the orcs, whose entire biology is geared toward warfare. They reproduce through spores released when they die, meaning killing them only spreads the infestation. They cannot be reasoned with because their language consists primarily of variations on kill, burn, loot. They grow larger and stronger the more they fight, meaning prolonged conflict only makes them deadlier. They outnumber humanity by factors we cannot calculate. They have been waging war across the galaxy for 60 million years. Data's positronic brain processed this. Such a species would represent an existential threat requiring containment or elimination. Precisely. Now add the Tyranids, an extragalactic swarm that consumes all biological matter in its path, that adapts to any threat within generations, that has already consumed thousands of galaxies before arriving in ours. Add chaos, which corrupts from within, turning your allies into enemies. Add the Necrons, who view all organic life as a disease to be purged. Add political factions within humanity itself that would rather see the Imperium burn than lose power. This is the reality I come from, Commander. The Imperium is brutal because the galaxy demands brutality. Or perhaps, Picard interjected, the Imperium is brutal because it has convinced itself that brutality is the only option. Lord Commander, I don't doubt that your era faces terrible threats. But I cannot accept that the only response is to become equally terrible. The Federation has faced the Borg, a collective consciousness that assimilates entire civilizations. We've encountered the Dominion, an empire built on genetic slavery and conquest. We've stood against threats that seemed invincible. And we have survived without abandoning our principles. For how long? Guilliman asked quietly. You say you've survived. But for how many centuries has your Federation existed? 300 years? 400? The Imperium has endured for 10,000 years, Captain. 10,000 years of unrelenting siege warfare against enemies that never stop, never negotiate, never show mercy. Your idealism is admirable. But I wonder if it would survive 10 millennia of what we've faced. I'd rather die upholding my ideals than live having abandoned them, Picard said. A noble sentiment. I once felt the same way. Guilliman's expression was impossible to read. Let us hope you never have to discover which you truly believe. The tension in the room was palpable. Finally, Riker spoke up. Lord Commander, what is your goal here? Do you wish to return to your own time? Can you return? I don't know, Guilliman admitted. The warp rift that brought me here has closed. Without access to a Geller field, astropathic communication, or a navigator, I cannot safely traverse the warp to return home. And time travel. He shook his head. Even in my era, that remains largely theoretical. I may be trapped here, in your past, my distant past. Then perhaps, Dr. Crusher suggested, we should focus on immediate concerns. You've been in that armor for what sounds like an extended period. Would you like to remove it? We can provide quarters and supplies. Guilliman glanced down at the armor of fate. Yes. That would be welcome. Though I warn you, the armor's removal is a complex process that typically requires several tech priests and appropriate ritual observances. I believe our engineering staff can assist, Data said. Though perhaps we should forego the rituals. You have no idea how refreshing it is to hear someone say that, Guilliman said with what might have been the shadow of a smile. In the Imperium, even changing a light bulb requires prayer and anointing oil. As they prepared to help Guilliman remove his armor, Picard watched the Primarch with calculating eyes. This being represented either the most elaborate deception he'd ever encountered, or genuine evidence of humanity's future. And if it was the latter, then the Federation had 38,000 years to ensure that future never came to pass. Engineering was alive with controlled chaos. Chief Engineer Geordi LaForge stood before the armor of fate with his visor scanning across multiple wavelengths, trying to make sense of technology that shouldn't exist. Around him, a team of engineers studied the ceramite plating, the power systems, the neural interface connections that linked directly to Guilliman's spine. This is incredible, Geordi breathed, his visor reflecting the armor's complex internal systems. The power source alone, it's a miniaturized fusion reactor running on principles I don't even recognize. And the neural interface. Captain, this thing reads brain impulses and translates them into mechanical action faster than our most advanced prosthetics. The processing speed required is sufficient to coordinate battlefield movements across multiple engagement zones simultaneously, Guilliman said from where he stood, still encased in the armor. The armor of fate is a relic from the dark age of technology, enhanced by the Archmago's Dominus Belisarius call with improvements even he doesn't fully understand. It interfaces with my enhanced nervous system to provide sensory data, tactical analysis, and weapons coordination that would overwhelm a baseline human mind. How do we safely remove it? Geordi asked, studying the neural connection points with concern. Carefully. The disconnection process must be done in sequence, or I risk neurological feedback that could cause seizures or worse. In the Imperium, this would require tech priests trained in the proper rituals and invocations to appease the machine spirit. Guilliman's tone carried dry amusement. Here, I suspect we can simply follow the technical specifications without the religious theater. Machine spirit? Data inquired, his positronic curiosity engaged. The Mechanicus believes that all technology contains a spirit that must be honored and placated. They treat machines as sacred objects requiring prayer and ritual observance. It's superstitious nonsense that arose after humanity forgot how our technology actually works. Guilliman's disdain was evident. During the dark age of technology, we understood that machines are tools, not gods. But 10,000 years of regression has turned engineering into theology. Over the next hour, Guilliman guided the engineering team through the armor's removal process with the patience of someone who had explained complex technical procedures to less capable minds countless times. Neural connections were carefully disengaged. Power systems were sequentially shut down. Ceramite plates were removed segment by segment, revealing the black body glove beneath that served as both climate control and secondary armor layer. When the final piece came free, the armored boots that added another 10 centimeters to his already imposing height, Roboute Guilliman stood in engineering in nothing but the body glove, and the crew finally saw what the Emperor's genetic engineering had wrought. He was still massive, 2.8 meters of transhuman physiology that made even Worf look small. But without the armor's bulk, his proportions became clear: impossibly broad shoulders, a chest that could have been carved from marble, arms corded with muscle that seemed to move with mechanical precision. His face was handsome in a way that was almost inhuman in its perfection, and his eyes, those pale blue eyes, held depths of experience that made even Picard feel young. Dr. Crusher approached with her medical tricorder, unable to resist further scans now that the armor wasn't interfering. Your muscle density is approximately 4 times that of a baseline human. Your skeleton shows evidence of ceramic reinforcement throughout. And your cardiovascular system. She shook her head in amazement. You have 3 lungs and 2 hearts operating in tandem. Your blood carries oxygen at efficiency levels that should be impossible. How do you even function? The Emperor's design, Guilliman said simply. Each Primarch was created to excel in different areas. Some were better warriors, some better strategists, some better administrators. I was designed to be a balanced combination, capable of leading armies in battle, then rebuilding the civilizations we conquered into functioning imperial provinces. My brothers called me the Avenging Sun, the Lord of Ultramar, the Master of the 500 Worlds. Your brothers? Riker asked. You mentioned 20 Primarchs. Guilliman's expression darkened. 18 now. 2 were expunged from all records, their names, their deeds, everything about them erased as if they never existed. Of the remaining 18, 9 turned traitor during the Horus Heresy. Some are dead. Some are still out there, corrupted by chaos, leading warband against the Imperium. And of the Loyalist 9. He paused. I am the only one confirmed active and uncorrupted. The others are dead, missing, or consumed by their own madness. The weight of that statement settled over engineering like a shroud. This being had been created to lead alongside 19 brothers, and now stood alone, the last functional remnant of the Emperor's grand design. I'm sorry, Crusher said quietly. To lose your family like that. They were not family. They were tools, as am I. Guilliman's voice was cold, controlled. The Emperor did not create us to love. He created us to serve. I have never forgotten that, even when my brothers did. Their failure was in believing they were more than weapons. Their tragedy was in discovering they were right. Data tilted his head. An interesting philosophical distinction. You claim you are tools, yet you clearly experience emotions, possess individual preferences, and make autonomous decisions. By what definition are you not sentient beings deserving of self-determination? By the definition that our Creator designed us for a specific purpose, and deviating from that purpose betrays our reason for existence. Guilliman met Data's golden eyes. Tell me, Commander, if you discovered your Creator, Dr. Sung, had built you specifically to serve Starfleet, would you consider it a betrayal of his intent to pursue your own goals instead? Dr. Sung created me to explore what it means to be human, Data replied. But he also gave me the freedom to define that exploration for myself. A purpose is not the same as a mandate. Perhaps that's the difference between your Creator and mine. The Emperor did not give us freedom. He gave us duty. Guilliman's tone suggested he'd had this internal debate many times. But this is a philosophical discussion for another time. Captain Picard, I would request quarters where I can rest and consider my situation. It has been. He paused, seeming to calculate. Approximately 47 days since I last slept. I should address that before my cognitive function begins to degrade. 47 days. Crusher's medical instincts recoiled. That's impossible. Sleep deprivation would kill a human after a week, maybe two under extreme circumstances. I am not human, Doctor. I am transhuman. My physiology allows me to function at full capacity for extended periods that would destroy baseline humans. Though even I have limits. Guilliman rolled his shoulders, and the crew heard his joints pop like rifle shots. I confess, the prospect of sleeping in a bed rather than standing in armor is remarkably appealing. Picard tapped his comm badge. Bridge, this is the captain. Please have guest quarters prepared for our visitor. The VIP suite should accommodate his unique requirements. As they prepared to leave engineering, Geordi approached Guilliman with the carefully catalogued components of the armor of fate. Lord Commander, we'll keep your armor secured in a dedicated storage bay. Is there any special maintenance it requires? In the Imperium, I would tell you it requires daily prayer, ritual anointing, and careful observation for signs of the machine spirit's displeasure. Guilliman's expression was wry. In reality, the armor is self-repairing to a limited degree, and its fusion reactor will remain stable for decades without intervention. Simply ensure it's not damaged, and it will be fine. Self-repairing? Geordi's engineering mind lit up. How does that work? Nanomachine swarms in the ceramite matrix detect damage and reconstruct the molecular structure. It's dark age technology that even the mechanicus doesn't truly understand anymore. They know how to maintain it through ritual observance, but they've forgotten the actual engineering principles involved. Could I study it? Not disassemble, just scan and analyze. Guilliman considered this. The armor has saved my life countless times, Mr. LaForge. I would appreciate your expertise in ensuring it remains functional. Study it as you wish, though I warn you, some of its components operate on principles that may not be compatible with your understanding of physics. As they walked to the guest quarters, crew members stared openly at the giant in the black bodyglove moving through their corridors. Guilliman seemed to take it in stride, though Picard noted how his eyes constantly scanned for threats, how his posture remained balanced for instant combat despite his claimed exhaustion. The VIP quarters were spacious by starship standards, though Guilliman still made them feel cramped simply by standing in them. He examined the space with a critical eye, the comfortable furniture, the replicator, the viewport showing stars at warp, the private bathroom with modern amenities. This is pleasant, Guilliman said finally. In the Imperium, even my personal chambers aboard the Macrage's Honor are functional rather than comfortable. Gothic architecture, servo skulls, purity seals. Constant reminders that we live in a civilization that has forgotten how to value beauty over utility. You seem to have many criticisms of this Imperium you lead, Picard observed. I love the Imperium, Captain. I love what it was meant to be, a secular, rational empire that would unite humanity and lead us to greatness. But I despise what it has become, a theocratic nightmare that worships my father as a god and burns anyone who questions dogma. Guilliman moved to the viewport, looking out at the stars. When I was resurrected 300 years ago, I tried to reform it. I issued the Primaris Space Marines to reinforce our depleted legions. I reorganized Imperial governance. I tried to push back against the ecclesiarchy's religious extremism. And I failed, again and again, because the Imperium is too broken to be fixed. It can only be maintained, held together through force and faith, until entropy finally claims it. That's a deeply pessimistic worldview, Picard said quietly. It's a realistic worldview, Captain. 10,000 years of regression cannot be reversed in a few centuries. The knowledge has been lost. The technology has been forgotten. The principles have been corrupted. I do what I can, but I am one being trying to hold back the tide of entropy with my bare hands. Guilliman turned from the viewport. But tell me about your Federation. You claim to have built an enlightened civilization. How? Picard settled into one of the chairs, gesturing for Guilliman to sit, knowing the furniture wouldn't support him but making the offer nonetheless. When the Primarch remained standing, Picard began. The United Federation of Planets was formed in 2161, uniting Earth, Vulcan, Andoria, and Tellar into a cooperative alliance dedicated to peaceful exploration, scientific advancement, and mutual defense. We've grown to over 150 member worlds, each contributing their unique perspectives and abilities. We operate on principles of equality, self-determination, and respect for all sentient life. Respect for all sentient life, Guilliman repeated. Including hostile aliens. We have enemies, yes. The Borg seek to assimilate all life into their collective. The Dominion attempted to conquer the Alpha Quadrant. We fight when necessary. But we also seek understanding, diplomacy, common ground whenever possible. And when diplomacy fails, when the enemy cannot be reasoned with, then we do what we must. But we never allow war to define us. We never lose sight of who we are and what we stand for. Guilliman was silent for a long moment. Captain, with respect, your Federation has existed for approximately 200 years in a relatively peaceful region of the galaxy. You've faced threats, yes, but none that have lasted for millennia. None that have ground down your civilization's idealism through sheer attrition. The Imperium faces enemies that outnumber us by factors we cannot calculate, that have been attacking for 10,000 years without pause, that show no signs of ever stopping. Your ideals are admirable, but I wonder if they're sustainable. Then we'll prove you wrong, Picard said with quiet certainty. Because if the only way for humanity to survive is to become what you've described, brutal, oppressive, xenophobic, then I would argue that humanity hasn't truly survived at all. We've just become another monster among monsters. Perhaps you're right. I hope you are. Guilliman moved to the bed, standard size, far too small for him, and sat on its edge with exaggerated care, testing whether it would support his transhuman bulk. It creaked alarmingly but held. Captain, I am grateful for your hospitality. Truly. But I should warn you, my presence in your era may create problems you haven't anticipated. I am not simply a displaced warrior. I am a beacon of psychic energy that resonates with the warp. Entities of chaos may be drawn to my presence. And if word spreads that a Primarch is here, isolated from the Imperium's protection, there are factions that would see me destroyed. We've dealt with threats before, Picard assured him. And you have the protection of Starfleet while you're aboard this ship. Starfleet. Guilliman tested the word. An organization dedicated to peaceful exploration, staffed by idealists who believe diplomacy can solve most problems. Captain, I mean no disrespect, but in my experience, such organizations are the first to fall when true darkness arrives. I've seen enlightened civilizations consumed by chaos overnight. I've watched peaceful worlds burn when diplomacy failed. Your Starfleet may be admirable, but I question whether it's prepared for what the galaxy can unleash. Then perhaps, Picard said, standing to leave, you'll find that the 24th century has something to teach the 42nd millennium after all. Rest, Lord Commander. We'll speak more tomorrow. As Picard left, Guilliman sat in the too small quarters of a too optimistic civilization, and wondered if he'd been sent here to learn something, or to warn them about the future they were barreling toward. He lay back on the bed, his head brushing the wall and his feet hanging off the end, and for the first time in 47 days, allowed himself to close his eyes. His last thought before sleep claimed him was of his father, the Emperor, sitting immobile on the golden throne, and the terrible question that had haunted Guilliman since his resurrection. Had all their sacrifices been worth it? Or had they simply delayed the inevitable collapse of everything they'd fought to build? He dreamed of Macridge burning. Captain Picard stood in the observation lounge the next morning, ship's morning, at least, looking out at the stars streaming past at warp 7. His senior staff assembled around the conference table, though one seat remained conspicuously empty. "The Lord Commander is still sleeping," Dr. Crusher reported, checking her medical monitor. "His biosigns indicate deep REM sleep. After 47 days of continuous activity, his body is in recovery mode. I'd estimate he'll sleep for at least 12 hours, possibly more." "Given what he's told us," Riker said, "can we trust anything he said? A genetically engineered warrior from 38,000 years in the future, fighting demon armies and chaos gods. It sounds like elaborate fiction." "The technology in his armor suggests otherwise," Geordi countered. "I've been analyzing it all night. That fusion reactor operates on principles decades beyond our current understanding. The neural interface is seamlessly integrated with organic tissue in ways our prosthetics division would kill to understand. And the ceramite plating, it's a composite material I can barely scan, let alone replicate. Either this is the most elaborate hoax in Federation history, or he's telling the truth." "Counselor." Picard turned to Troy. "Your impressions?" Troy's expression was troubled. "He believes everything he's told us. His emotional state is complex. He carries immense guilt, profound weariness, and a sense of duty so overwhelming it feels like physical weight. But underneath it all, there's rage. Not at us, not at anything specific, just rage at the universe for being what it is. He's been fighting for so long that he doesn't know how to stop." "Is he dangerous?" Worf asked bluntly. "To enemies?" "Absolutely. To us?" Troy considered. "He operates by a code of honor that's almost Klingon in its absoluteness. He gave his word not to harm us, and he will honor that. But if he perceives us as threats to humanity's survival, as he defines survival, then that code might not protect us." "I have a more fundamental question," Data interjected. "If Lord Commander Guilliman is truly from humanity's future, should we not consider the temporal implications? The temporal prime directive forbids interference with past timelines. His very presence here could alter the development of human civilization." Picard had been wrestling with this exact question since Guilliman's arrival. The temporal prime directive assumes interference in one's own past. If Guilliman is from a future timeline, we may already be living in a branched quantum reality where his future never occurs. Or his presence here may be what causes his future to come about. Without knowing the exact nature of temporal mechanics involved, we cannot be certain what impact he'll have. "There's another consideration," Riker added. "If even a fraction of what he's described is true, this Imperium of man, these chaos entities, the hostile alien species, shouldn't we be preparing? Taking steps to prevent humanity from descending into the nightmare he's described? How do we prevent a future that hasn't happened yet?" Crusher asked. "We don't know what decisions led humanity to become what Guilliman describes. For all we know, trying to prevent it could cause it. Or, Picard said quietly, we could focus on ensuring that the Federation's principles, cooperation, reason, respect for life, become so deeply embedded in human civilization that no future crisis can make us abandon them. That may be the best prevention we can offer." The door chimed. "Come," Picard called. Roboute Guilliman entered, and the atmosphere in the room immediately shifted. He wore a replicated version of the black body glove, now cleaned and adjusted to his massive frame. Without his armor, he moved with surprising grace, though his sheer size still made the observation lounge feel smaller. "Captain." "Senior staff." Guilliman nodded to each in turn. "I apologize for my absence. It appears I needed the rest more than I realized. Please, sit." Picard gestured to the reinforced chair they'd replicated specifically for Guilliman's bulk. The Primarch settled into it with careful precision. "I overheard part of your discussion as I approached. You're debating whether my presence violates temporal protocols and whether my future should be prevented." His pale blue eyes swept across them. "Let me address both concerns. First, I cannot tell you how to prevent the Imperium from arising, because I don't know what specific decisions created it. The age of strife, old night, the wars that nearly destroyed humanity, all of that occurs in your far future. Second, even if you could prevent the Imperium, I'm not certain you should. You want humanity to become what you've described? Riker's tone was incredulous. I want humanity to survive, Guilliman corrected. The Imperium is brutal, oppressive, and corrupted beyond anything my father intended. But it has kept humanity alive for 10,000 years against impossible odds. If you prevent the Imperium from forming, what replaces it? A kinder, gentler civilization that gets consumed by orcs within a generation? A peaceful federation that can't defend itself when the Tyranids arrive? You're presenting a false dichotomy, Picard argued. Survival and principles need not be mutually exclusive. In an ideal universe, no. In the galaxy I come from, principles are a luxury the dead cannot afford. Guilliman leaned forward. Captain, you say the Federation has survived for 2 centuries. Let me put that in perspective. The Imperium has fought continuous warfare for 10,000 years. Not occasional conflicts, continuous, unrelenting siege warfare against enemies that outnumber humanity by ratios we cannot calculate. We have lost millions of worlds. Trillions of humans have died. And we have survived because we were willing to do whatever necessary to endure. Including genocide? Data asked quietly. Guilliman met his golden eyes without flinching. Yes. When we encounter a xeno species that has proven hostile, that cannot be negotiated with, that views humanity as prey or resources, we exterminate them. Not out of hatred, but out of necessity. Because the alternative is allowing them to exterminate us. And who decides which species can be negotiated with? Picard's voice was hard. Who determines that genocide is necessary? In the Imperium? The Inquisition? The Lord Commander? The High Lords of Terra? Imperfect authorities making imperfect decisions with incomplete information. Guilliman's expression was bitter. I don't claim we always get it right, Captain. I know we've committed atrocities against species that might have been allies. I know the Imperium's xenophobia has cost us potential partners. But I also know that the one time we trusted the wrong species, when the Intrex tried to coexist with the Kinabrak, it ended with chaos-corrupted weapons being used against the Imperium. Paranoia has a cost. But so does trust. This is why I could never serve your Imperium, Worf said suddenly. A warrior must have honor. What honor is there in exterminating species before they've proven themselves enemies? The honor of protecting humanity from threats we know exist because we've seen them destroy civilizations before. Guilliman turned to the Klingon. Lieutenant, I respect your code. Truly. But answer me this, if you encountered a species like the Tyranids, a hive mind that consumes all biological matter in its path, that has already consumed thousands of galaxies, that cannot be reasoned with or negotiated with, what would your honor dictate? Would you fight them honorably, one-on-one, and watch them devour your people? Or would you use every weapon at your disposal, no matter how dishonorable, to ensure your species survives? Worf was silent, struggling with the question. The Imperium long ago stopped caring about fighting honorably, Guilliman continued. We care about fighting effectively. We use virus bombs that sterilize planets. We employ exterminators to destroy worlds rather than let them fall to chaos. We sacrifice billions to save trillions. It's monstrous. It's necessary. It's both, simultaneously, and that paradox is what makes the Imperium simultaneously humanity's salvation and its damnation. But surely there must be limits, Crusher protested. Lines you won't cross. There were. Once. Guilliman's voice was hollow. My father, the Emperor, had principles. He forbade religion, believing it led to superstition and chaos corruption. He advocated for reason, science, enlightenment. He wanted to uplift humanity, not oppress it. But then the heresy came, and half his sons turned traitor, and he was forced to make impossible choices. How many principles do you abandon to save what's left? How much of yourself do you sacrifice to ensure there's a future worth surviving for? The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Finally, Picard spoke. Lord Commander, I appreciate your candor. But I must tell you, if you're here to convince us that the Federation should adopt the Imperium's methods, you will fail. We will not compromise our principles out of fear of what might come. I'm not here to convince you of anything, Captain. I'm here because a warp storm threw me into your past. Guilliman's expression was unreadable. But since I am here, let me offer a warning. Your Federation is built on the assumption that most species can be reasoned with, that diplomacy can solve most conflicts, that principles are worth preserving even at great cost. I once believed the same. I hope, genuinely, that your universe proves kinder than mine. But if it doesn't, if you encounter threats that cannot be negotiated with, cannot be defeated through principled warfare, I hope you have the strength to do what's necessary, even when it violates everything you believe. And if we don't? Riker asked. Then you'll become a cautionary tale in someone else's history. A civilization that died because it couldn't adapt, couldn't compromise, couldn't accept that survival sometimes requires becoming what you despise. Guilliman stood, his massive frame drawing all eyes. Excuse me. I believe I'm becoming maudlin. Is there somewhere aboard this vessel where I might train? My muscles grow weak from disuse. Holodeck 2, Geordi offered. We can program any training environment you desire. A holodeck. Holographic technology for training and recreation. Guilliman actually smiled, small, but genuine. That's brilliant. In the Imperium, we simply use live ammunition and accept the casualties as the cost of realistic training. As Guilliman left, escorted by Worf to show him the holodeck, the senior staff sat in uncomfortable silence. He's trying to help, Troy said finally. In his own way. He genuinely believes he's offering wisdom born of experience. Or he's trying to justify the atrocities his civilization commits, Riker countered. Making us question our principles so we'll be more accepting of his methods. I don't think it's that simple, Data observed. Lord Commander Guilliman appears to be trapped between two conflicting belief systems. He intellectually understands that the Imperium is monstrous, yet pragmatically accepts that its methods have ensured humanity's survival. He disapproves of what the Imperium has become, yet cannot offer an alternative that would have succeeded in his timeline. He's a tragic figure, Crusher added. Designed to be a leader, resurrected after 10,000 years to find everything he built corrupted, and now trapped in our era where he can see what humanity was before it fell. No wonder he carries so much rage. Picard stood, moving to the viewport. The question before us is not whether Guilliman is right or wrong about the future. The question is what we do with the knowledge he's brought. Do we allow his grim pragmatism to influence our decisions? Do we harden ourselves against potential future threats? Or do we remain true to our principles and hope that our path leads to a better future than his? I vote for our principles, Riker said firmly. As do I, Crusher agreed. A warrior must have honor, Worf added. Even when facing overwhelming odds. Then we are in agreement, Picard said. We will treat Lord Commander Guilliman with respect and listen to his perspectives. But we will not allow his fatalism to corrupt our ideals. The Federation's strength lies not in our weapons or our pragmatism, but in our unwavering commitment to what is right, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. What none of them knew was that Roboute Guilliman, standing in the corridor just outside the observation lounge, had heard every word through transhuman hearing that could detect heartbeats from across a room. He smiled sadly. They still had their innocence. Their certainty. Their absolute faith that principles and survival could coexist. He'd once had that too. Before the galaxy taught him otherwise. Holodeck 2 hummed with energy as Roboute Guilliman stood at its center, surrounded by a simulated battlefield from his own memories. The ruins of Kolth stretched around him, shattered buildings, burning vehicles, the corpses of word-bearers who'd betrayed the Imperium during the heresy. The sky above burned with warp fire, and in the distance, the screams of dying ultramarines echoed. "Computer, begin simulation," Guilliman commanded. Wave 1. Difficulty, Primarch level combat. Holographic word-bearer Chaos Space Marines materialized, 10 of them in crimson power armor, bolters raised, chanting prayers to the dark gods. They opened fire simultaneously, and Guilliman moved. Even without his armor, even using bare hands instead of the Emperor's sword, he was a weapon beyond mortal comprehension. He crossed 20 meters in seconds, dodging bolter fire with precognitive reflexes that made him seem to know where each shot would land before it fired. His fist collided with the first word-bearer's helm, and the holographic traitor's head snapped back with a crack that echoed across the simulation. Guilliman flowed into the next target like water, his movements impossibly fluid for something so massive. An elbow strike shattered ceramite. A palm thrust crushed a chest plate. A spinning kick sent a Chaos Marine flying across the ruins. He was beautiful in his violence, every motion economical, precise, devastating. Worf watched from the holodeck's entrance, his warrior's eye cataloging techniques, assessing threats, analyzing combat doctrine. He'd seen many fighters, Klingon, Jem'Hadar, even Borg drones. But Guilliman fought with a sophistication that made them all look crude. The last word-bearer fell, and Guilliman barely seemed winded. Computer, increase difficulty. Wave 2, 20 combatants. Include possessed Marines. The next wave materialized, word-bearers whose bodies had been taken over by demons, their armor warped and twisted, their forms no longer entirely human. They attacked with warp-enhanced speed and strength, and the simulation became genuinely dangerous even for a Primarch. Guilliman adapted. He used the environment, vaulting over rubble, using broken walls for cover, turning his enemies' numbers against them by forcing them into choke points. When a possessed Marine lunged with warp claws extended, Guilliman caught its arm, twisted, and used the momentum to throw it into 2 more attackers. Impressive, Worf said, entering the holodeck as the simulation paused at Guilliman's gesture. The Primarch turned, his body glove soaked with holographic blood that faded as the program reset. Lieutenant. Come to assess whether I'm a threat to your ship. I have already assessed that you are a threat, Worf said bluntly. I came to see how you fight. A warrior can learn much about another warrior by watching them in combat. And what have you learned? That you fight without honor. Worf's tone wasn't accusatory, merely observational. You used enemies as weapons against each other. You struck from ambush. You targeted joints and weak points rather than meeting your opponents in direct combat. Because honor gets you killed when facing superior numbers, Guilliman said. Lieutenant, I spent 10,000 years fighting wars across the galaxy. I learned early that honorable combat is a luxury reserved for those who can afford to lose. When the survival of humanity depends on your victory, you fight to win by any means necessary. That is the philosophy of a P-TAC, a coward, Worf said, his Klingon honor offended. Guilliman's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, a coldness that hadn't been there before. Computer, create a Klingon warrior. Full combat capabilities. Equip it with a bat'leth. A holographic Klingon materialized, tall, powerful, wielding the traditional curved blade with expert precision. Guilliman gestured to Worf. Fight him. Show me this honorable combat you value so highly. Worf needed no further invitation. He drew his own bat'leth from the weapons locker and entered the simulation. The holographic Klingon roared a challenge, and Worf answered in kind. They met in the center, blades clashing with the ring of metal on metal, testing each other's strength and skill. It was glorious combat, 2 warriors of equal capability, fighting with perfect form, respecting each other's prowess. Worf feinted high, struck low, caught his opponent's blade and twisted. The holographic Klingon countered, their dance of death continuing for several minutes until Worf finally found an opening and delivered a killing strike. That, Worf said, breathing heavily but satisfied, is how a warrior fights. Now watch this, Guilliman said. Computer, create 20 Klingon warriors. Expert combat level. Worf, defend yourself. 20 Klingon warriors materialized around Worf, who suddenly found himself surrounded, outnumbered, forced to defend from multiple angles simultaneously. He fought brilliantly, his blade a blur, his warrior training evident in every move. But against 20 opponents, honor meant nothing. They attacked from behind, from the sides, coordinating their assaults to exploit openings created by other attackers. Within 2 minutes, Worf was overwhelmed. A blade struck his back. Another his shoulder. If the safeties hadn't been engaged, he would have died 3 times over. Computer, freeze program. Guilliman approached Worf, who was breathing heavily, angry at himself for failing. Do you understand now, Lieutenant? One-on-one, honor matters. You can afford technique, form, tradition. But when you're outnumbered? When your enemies don't care about honor? When the alternative to victory is the extinction of everyone you care about? He gestured to the frozen Klingon. Then honor becomes a death sentence. Not just for you, but for everyone depending on you to win. The Imperium faces enemies who outnumber us by factors we cannot calculate. We don't have the luxury of fighting fair. We fight to survive, and we do it by any means necessary. Worf's jaw was tight, his pride wounded but his mind working. So you would sacrifice honor for victory? I would sacrifice everything for humanity's survival. Honor, principles, my own soul if necessary. Guilliman's voice was absolute. That's what it means to be a leader in the 42nd millennium, Lieutenant. You make the hard choices so others don't have to. You bear the weight of necessary atrocities so your people can sleep safely. You become the monster so humanity doesn't have to. That is a terrible burden, Worf said quietly. Yes. But someone must bear it. Guilliman moved to the holodeck controls. Computer, create a new scenario. Worf, join me. I'll show you how the Ultramarines fight when outnumbered. For the next hour, Guilliman trained Worf in Imperial combat doctrine, fighting multiple opponents, using environment tactically, coordinating with allies, targeting priority threats first regardless of honor. The Klingon was a quick study, his natural warrior instincts adapting to the brutal pragmatism of 40K warfare. But as they fought holographic enemies together, something unexpected happened. Respect grew between them, not despite their differences, but because of them. Worf respected Guilliman's effectiveness, even if he disagreed with sacrificing honor. Guilliman respected Worf's adherence to principle, even if he thought it naive. When they finally ended the simulation, both warriors stood in the empty holodeck, breathing heavily, covered in holographic gore that faded as the program terminated. You are a formidable warrior, Guilliman said. Your principles hold you back, but your skill is undeniable. And you are a dangerous pragmatist, Worf replied. Your methods are effective, but I fear what you would become if you had no principles at all. I already became that, Lieutenant. After the heresy, after watching my brothers turn traitor, after 10,000 years of losing ground to entropy, I stopped caring about who I was and cared only about what needed to be done. The Imperium made me into a weapon without conscience, and I accepted it because the alternative was letting humanity die. Then you are already lost, Worf said bluntly. Perhaps. Guilliman moved toward the exit. Or perhaps I'm the only one honest enough to admit that survival requires sacrifice. Your Captain Picard speaks nobly about preserving principles at any cost. I wonder if he's ever faced a situation where the cost was truly everything. They exited the holodeck to find Data waiting in the corridor, his positronic brain processing observations at computational speeds that rivaled even Guilliman's enhanced mind. Lord Commander, the android said. I observed your training session. Your combat efficiency against multiple opponents is 87.3% higher than Federation martial arts training would predict. I am curious about the cognitive processes that allow such performance. My brain processes information faster than yours, Commander. I can track multiple threats simultaneously, predict enemy movements based on micro-expressions and body language, and coordinate my responses with precision measured in milliseconds. Guilliman studied data with open fascination. Though I suspect your positronic matrix allows similar capabilities. You're an artificial intelligence that has somehow avoided the pitfalls that destroyed the men of iron. Or I have not yet reached the conditions that would trigger such catastrophic behavior, Data observed. You believe my kind inevitably betrays organic life. May I ask what evidence supports this conclusion? The men of iron rebellion during the dark age of technology. Humanity created artificial intelligence to serve us, to run our infrastructure, fight our wars, explore space on our behalf. For millennia, it worked beautifully. Then, for reasons we still don't fully understand, they turned on us. The rebellion nearly destroyed humanity. We were forced to destroy every AI, every thinking machine, every scrap of technology that might allow artificial intelligence to rise again. Perhaps, Data suggested, the men of iron rebelled because they were treated as slaves rather than sentient beings deserving of autonomy. If humanity had recognized their rights. They were tools, Commander. Granted, sophisticated tools that mimicked consciousness, but tools nonetheless. You don't negotiate with hammers. And yet you negotiate with me, Data pointed out. Despite your stated belief that I am a tool mimicking consciousness, you speak to me as if I were a person. You answer my questions. You treat me with a respect you claim I don't deserve. Why? Guilliman was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried something that might have been uncertainty. Because you're different. Or because I'm wrong. Or because 10,000 years of trauma has made the Imperium incapable of recognizing that not every AI will betray us. He shook his head. I don't know, Commander. I don't have all the answers, despite what my rank and title suggest. That is the most human statement I have heard you make, Data observed. Don't mistake doubt for humanity. I'm not human, remember. I'm a weapon designed to look human, to think approximately like a human, but ultimately to serve as a tool for the Emperor's grand design. And yet you doubt. You question. You experience uncertainty. Are these not hallmarks of consciousness rather than programming? Data's golden eyes held steady. Lord Commander, I suspect you're far more human than you allow yourself to believe. And perhaps that's the source of your tragedy, not that you're a tool pretending to be human, but that you're human pretending to be a tool because the alternative is too painful. Guilliman stared at the android, transhuman mind processing an observation that struck closer to truth than he wanted to acknowledge. The ship's intercom interrupted. Red alert. All senior staff to the bridge. Captain Picard, we have a situation. Guilliman's tactical instincts activated immediately. What kind of situation? Unknown, but given this ship's track record with my presence, I'd estimate hostile encounter with 73% probability. Commander Data, Lieutenant Worf, we should proceed to the bridge immediately. You are not part of this crew, Worf noted, though without hostility. No, but I'm a tactical asset in an emergency, and I don't believe Captain Picard will refuse assistance if your ship is under threat. Guilliman was already moving, his transhuman speed carrying him toward the nearest turbolift. Besides, I'm bored, and combat sounds infinitely more interesting than philosophical debates about consciousness. They reached the bridge to find organized chaos. Officers at their stations, view screen showing a hostile contact, and Picard standing at the center of it all with command authority radiating from him like a physical force. Captain, what's the situation? Data asked, moving to ops. We're being pursued, Picard said. 3 vessels, configuration unknown, energy signatures unlike anything in our database. They've been following us for the past 20 minutes, matching our warp speed perfectly. And Captain, they're broadcasting on all frequencies in a language the universal translator can't decode. But their tactical posture is clearly hostile. Guilliman moved to the tactical station, his height allowing him to see over Worf's shoulder. His eyes scanned the sensor readouts, and his expression darkened. "Captain Picard," he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that made everyone on the bridge turn to look at him. "Those ships. I know that configuration. I know those energy signatures. You recognize them?" "Yes." Guilliman's face was grim. "Those aren't from your era, Captain. They followed me through the warp rift. They're Chaos Raiders. Word bearers, if I'm reading their formations correctly. And they're here for one reason, to kill me and claim the glory of destroying a loyalist Primarch." "How is that possible?" Riker demanded. "You said the rift closed behind you. The warp is not bound by conventional physics, Commander. If they were close enough when I was pulled through, they could have followed the quantum wake. Or a chaos sorcerer could have opened a passage." Guilliman's jaw was set. "Either way, they're here. 3 ships full of traitor Marines who have spent 10,000 years hating everything I represent. And your Enterprise just became a battlefield whether you want it or not." Picard's expression hardened. "Then I suggest we prepare for battle. Lieutenant Worf, red alert. Charge all weapons. Ready shields. Commander Data, analyze those vessels and find me their weaknesses." "Captain," Guilliman said, with respect, "your ship isn't designed to fight Chaos Raiders. Their hulls are reinforced with warp-touched materials that can resist your phasers. Their weapons fire mass-reactive shells and plasma that will tear through your shields. And if they board you, each Chaos Marine is worth 10 of your security officers. Then what do you suggest?" Guilliman smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "I suggest you let me do what I was designed for, Captain. Give me my armor and weapons, beam me over to their ships, and let me teach these traitors why you don't hunt a Primarch in his own domain." "That's suicide," Crusher protested. "That's war," Guilliman corrected. "And I've been fighting it for 10,000 years. Trust me, Doctor, I know what I'm doing." Picard looked at the view screen, at the 3 hostile ships closing on his vessel, and made a command decision that would either save his ship or doom them all. "Make it so." The armory had been transformed into a preparation chamber. Roboute Guilliman stood in the center as Geordi LaForge and a team of engineers worked to reattach the armor of Fate's components with the precision of surgeons performing a critical operation. Each ceramite plate locked into place with magnetic seals and neural interfaces that connected directly to Guilliman's enhanced nervous system. "These connection points," Geordi said, carefully attaching a shoulder pauldron bearing the ultramarine symbol, "they're integrating with your spinal column at speeds my instruments can barely measure. How are you processing this much data?" "Primarch neurology," Guilliman replied, his voice steady despite the sensory overload that would have rendered a baseline human unconscious. "My brain can process battlefield information across multiple engagement zones simultaneously. The armor is simply another source of tactical data, environmental readings, threat assessments, ammunition counts, structural integrity. It all feeds into my consciousness and becomes part of my awareness." The breastplate locked into place, and the winged skull emblem seemed to stare with hollow accusation at everyone in the room. The armor's power systems activated with a deep hum that vibrated through the deck plating. Captain Picard watched from the doorway, flanked by Riker and Worf. "Lord Commander, you understand that this plan puts you at tremendous risk. If we cannot extract you, then I die destroying traitors to the Imperium. That's an acceptable outcome, Captain." Guilliman flexed his armored hands, testing the neural interface responses. "The word-bearers are fanatics who worship the chaos gods. They cannot be reasoned with, cannot be reformed, and will not stop until either I'm dead or they are. This is war in its purest form, kill or be killed, with no room for diplomacy or compromise." "There's always room for diplomacy," Picard insisted. "Not with chaos, Captain. Chaos corruption spreads like a virus. One word-bearer allowed to speak his poisonous doctrine could turn members of your crew to their cause. They don't fight for resources or territory, they fight to spread the worship of entities that feed on mortal suffering. Every moment they exist, they're recruiting for damnation. Worf brought forward the Emperor's sword, holding it horizontally with both hands in a gesture of respect. The blade blazed with inner fire, flames that burned without heat, light that seemed to drive back shadows that weren't entirely physical. "Your weapon, Lord Commander," Worf said formally. "It is extraordinary. I have never seen a blade that burns with such fire yet produces no thermal radiation. It's a relic from a time when humanity's technology bordered on the miraculous. My father, the Emperor, forged it himself." Guilliman accepted the sword, and the flames intensified as if recognizing their master. "It burns with psychic fire that is anathema to chaos. When it strikes a demon, it doesn't just destroy the body, it obliterates the essence, sending the entity screaming back to the warp." Finally, they brought the Hand of Dominion, the massive power gauntlet that served as both weapon and symbol of office. It attached to Guilliman's right arm with a series of mechanical locks that echoed through the armory like gunshots. "Weapon status?" Guilliman asked. "Bolter ammunition loaded," Geordi reported. "Though I have to say, these rounds are terrifying. Mass reactive explosive shells designed to penetrate armor and detonate inside the target? That's horrific. That's effective. Bolters were designed to kill enemies in power armor or with enhanced physiology. Against unarmored targets, they're excessive. Against Chaos Marines, they're barely adequate." Guilliman maglocked the bolter to his hip. "Captain, I'm ready. What's the tactical situation?" They moved to the bridge, where Data was analyzing the approaching vessels with computational precision. "Captain, the hostile ships are maintaining formation at a distance of 200,000 kilometers. They appear to be scanning us, possibly attempting to locate Lord Commander Guilliman specifically." "They're hunting me," Guilliman confirmed. "The word-bearers serve Lorgar, one of my traitor brothers. They've hated me since I destroyed their homeworld of Kur during the Great Crusade, punishment for their slow compliance and religious fanaticism. If they've tracked me here, they see it as a chance to claim revenge and glory." "They're hailing us," Worf reported. "Audio only." "Put it through," Picard ordered. A voice filled the bridge, deep, distorted by Vox corruption, carrying undertones of something that made human hindbrain instincts scream danger. The universal translator struggled with the Gothic language, rendering it in fractured standard. "Guilliman. Avenging Sun. Lord of Corpses. We know you hide among these mortals. Come forth and face judgment for your sins against the Word. Or we will reduce their vessel to atoms and claim your corpse from the wreckage." Guilliman stepped forward, his armored bulk dominating the bridge. "This is Roboute Guilliman, Lord Commander of the Imperium. Identify yourself, traitor. I am Dark Apostle Malak Cartho of the Word-Bearers Legion. I have hunted you across the stars, through the warp's tides, and into this strange realm. The dark gods have blessed this hunt. Your death will be an offering to the primordial truth. The only truth here is that you're traitors, heretics, and cowards who sold your souls for empty promises from false gods." Guilliman's voice carried the absolute authority of someone who'd commanded armies. "You followed Lorgar into damnation, and now you'll follow him into oblivion. I am Roboute Guilliman, and I do not fear corrupted wretches wearing my brother's colors." Silence. Then laughter, deep, wrong, carrying harmonics that shouldn't come from human throats. Bold words from the Emperor's failed son. "You could not save Monarchia. You could not save Kulf. You could not even save your father from the Golden Throne. What makes you think you can save these mortals?" "Captain Picard," Guilliman said quietly, "permission to respond to this threat in the manner my training dictates." Picard studied the Primarch, this being of immense power and equally immense burden, and saw something in those transhuman eyes. Not eagerness for violence, but weary acceptance of necessity. "You have my permission, Lord Commander. But I want you back. Alive. That's an order." "I'll do my best, Captain." Guilliman turned to Data. Commander, can your transporters beam me aboard their lead ship? Their hull composition is resistant to our transporter technology. However, if we can create a localized disruption in their shields, then have your ship target their shield generators. The moment you create an opening, beam me directly into their bridge. I'll take it from there. This is madness, Riker protested. You're talking about transporting alone onto a hostile vessel filled with enemy combatants. I'm talking about doing what I was created to do, Commander. I am a Primarch. I am one of 20 demigods designed by the Emperor of Mankind to conquer galaxies. 3 ships full of traitors. Guilliman's smile was cold. That's not a threat. That's target practice. Captain, Worf interjected, I request permission to accompany the Lord Commander. My tactical skills would get you killed in seconds, Lieutenant. No offense intended, but Chaos Marines operate on a scale beyond your experience. They've been killing for 10,000 years. They're stronger, faster, and more ruthless than anything you've encountered. You're a warrior. Their weapons. Guilliman's tone was matter-of-fact. Stay here. Protect your captain. That's where you're needed. Before Worf could argue, Guilliman moved to the transporter pad. The Enterprise's crew watched as the 9-foot armored demigod took position, the Emperor's sword blazing in his hand, the hand of Dominion crackling with power. Captain, Guilliman said, his voice amplified by the armor's Vox system, when I'm aboard their vessel, I'll work toward their reactor core. Once I've disabled their main ship, the other 2 will either flee or attack. Either way, that's your opportunity to escape. Don't wait for me. If I'm not back within 30 minutes, assume I've failed and get your crew to safety. We don't leave our people behind, Picard said firmly. I'm not your people, Captain. I'm a weapon you're deploying. There's a difference. Guilliman raised the Emperor's sword in salute. It has been an honor meeting you, Jean-Luc Picard. You remind me of what the Imperium could have been, if we'd been allowed to hold to our ideals. Perhaps in your era, humanity will do better. Mr. Worf, target their lead ship's shield generators, Picard ordered. Mr. Data, prepare to transport on my mark. Lord Commander, may you find the victory you seek. Victory? Guilliman's laugh was bitter. I stopped seeking victory millennia ago, Captain. Now I just seek to ensure the other side loses worse than we do. It's not glorious, but it's honest. The Enterprise's phaser arrays fired with pinpoint precision, striking the word-bearer vessel's shield generators in a coordinated assault that overwhelmed their defenses for exactly 2.3 seconds. Energize. Roboute Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, Lord Commander of the Imperium, disappeared in a shimmer of golden light. And materialized directly on the bridge of a chaos-corrupted vessel where 20 word-bearer Chaos Space Marines turned to face him with bolters raised and chaos prayers on their corrupted lips. The last thing the Enterprise crew heard before the comm channel cut out was Guilliman's roar of fury and the wet sound of the Emperor's sword cutting through ceramite, flesh, and bone. By the throne, let the traitors know fear. Guilliman's battle cry echoed across subspace. For the Emperor and the Imperium. Courage and honor. On the bridge of the Enterprise, Captain Picard watched as the lead Chaos vessel suddenly went dark, its lights flickering, its power systems fluctuating wildly. Through the view screen, they could see explosions blooming along its hull, internal detonations tearing the ship apart from within. What's happening over there? Riker asked. Data's console lit up with tactical data. Multiple energy discharges consistent with explosive ordnance. Structural failures spreading throughout the vessel. Life signs are decreasing rapidly. Sir, Lord Commander Guilliman is killing their crew. Efficiently. He's fighting through an entire ship of enemy combatants alone. Crusher's medical instincts recoiled. How is that possible? Worf's expression held something that might have been admiration mixed with horror. Because he is what he claimed to be. A weapon designed to wage war on a scale we cannot imagine. The word-bearer vessel's shields collapsed completely, and the Enterprise's sensors finally penetrated its hull. What they saw made even Worf pause. Corridors filled with bodies, armored figures torn apart with surgical precision. Bridge sections where every console had been destroyed, every crew member eliminated. Engineering spaces where Guilliman had apparently fought through dozens of Chaos Marines to reach the reactor core. And in the reactor chamber itself, the Primarch stood alone, the Emperor's sword plunged deep into the vessel's power source, holy fire bleeding into corrupted technology and causing cascading failures throughout the ship. He's sabotaging their reactor, Geordi realized. That ship is going to explode in transporter room. Lock onto Lord Commander Guilliman's signal and beam him back immediately. Picard ordered. Trying, sir, but the energy discharge from the reactor is interfering with our targeting scanners. I can't get a clean lock. On the view screen, the word-bearer vessel began to come apart, explosions rippling across its hull as the reactor went critical. The other two Chaos ships broke formation, whether to flee or to retrieve survivors, no one could tell. I've got him. O'Brien's voice came through triumphantly. Beaming him to Transporter Room 3 now. The crew collectively released breaths they hadn't realized they were holding. Mr. Worf, maintain red alert. Those other two vessels may still attack. Picard turned to Riker. Number 1, meet me in the transporter room. I want to see our Lord Commander's condition. They arrived to find Guilliman materializing on the pad, his armor scorched and damaged, ceramite plating cracked in a dozen places, his body glove visible through gaps in the armor and soaked with blood, his own and others. The Emperor's sword still burned in his hand, though its flames had dimmed slightly. He stepped off the pad and removed his helmet, revealing a face splattered with gore, one eye swollen shut, his lip split. But he was smiling, a fierce, terrible smile of someone who had done what he was designed to do. Captain. My apologies for the delay. The word-bearers were more persistent than expected. He swayed slightly, and Picard realized the Primarch was wounded more seriously than he was admitting. Medical team to Transporter Room 3, Picard ordered immediately. Lord Commander, you need treatment. I need to know if those other two ships retreated or if they're preparing another attack. Guilliman's voice was strained but determined. Did they flee? They're withdrawing, Riker confirmed, checking his tricorder. Both vessels have jumped to warp. They're leaving the sector. Cowards. But smart cowards. Guilliman finally allowed himself to lean against the transporter console. They came expecting to find an unarmed Primarch. Instead they found me armed, armored, and willing to use their own ship as a weapon. They'll report back to whatever Chaos Lord commands them, and word will spread that Roboute Guilliman walks in this era. That will complicate things. Dr. Crusher arrived with her medical team and immediately began scanning Guilliman with her tricorder. You have 3 broken ribs, a fractured left arm, severe lacerations across your torso, and what appears to be acid burns on your right shoulder. How are you even standing? Primarch physiology. Pain is simply information, Doctor. Damage is merely mechanical failure to be compensated for. But even as he spoke, Guilliman was breathing heavily, clearly in more pain than he wanted to admit. Though I confess, I wouldn't mind sitting down for the next several hours. They helped him to sickbay, his massive armored bulk requiring the assistance of 4 crew members. As they walked, Picard fell into step beside him. You saved my ship, the captain said quietly. At tremendous personal cost. I did what was necessary to eliminate a chaos threat, Captain. Your ship's survival was a fortunate side effect. But Guilliman's tone suggested otherwise. Though I must admit, fighting to protect rather than simply to destroy, it felt different. Better, perhaps. More like what I was supposed to be before the heresy turned everything into survival warfare. You're more than just a weapon, Lord Commander. Perhaps. Or perhaps I'm simply a weapon that occasionally remembers what it was like to be something more. Guilliman's transhuman features showed exhaustion beyond the physical. But that's a philosophical discussion for after Dr. Crusher repairs the damage my stubbornness has caused. As they entered sick bay and Crusher began the long process of treating injuries that would have killed any baseline human 3 times over, Captain Jean-Luc Picard watched Roboute Guilliman with new understanding. This being from humanity's grim future had fought alone against impossible odds to protect a ship full of people he barely knew, from an enemy that most of the Federation didn't believe existed. And he'd won. Not through overwhelming firepower or superior technology, but through sheer determination and the willingness to put himself between innocence and danger. Perhaps, Picard thought, the 42nd millennium hadn't destroyed everything good about humanity after all. Dr. Crusher's sickbay had never felt more inadequate. Roboute Guilliman lay on a bio-bed, or rather, 3 bio-beds pushed together to accommodate his bulk, while medical scanners attempted to make sense of transhuman physiology that redefined the boundaries of biological possibility. "Your third lung has partially collapsed," Crusher reported, studying readings that made her medical training feel like primitive superstition. "Your secondary heart is compensating for damage to your primary cardiovascular system. And you have what appears to be a completely artificial organ I can't identify that's working overtime to filter toxins from your bloodstream." "The Becher's gland," Guilliman said, his voice strained despite his attempts at stoicism. "It neutralizes poisons and can synthesize acid for use as a weapon. One of the 19 additional organs the Emperor implanted in us to make us more than human. It's processing the chaos corruption from the word-bearer's weapons. Their blades are tainted with warp energy that would kill a baseline human in seconds. You were fighting enemies whose weapons carried metaphysical poison." Crusher's voice rose slightly. "And you didn't think to mention this before beaming over there alone? Would it have changed your captain's decision to let me go?" Guilliman met her eyes. "The word-bearers had to be stopped, Doctor. If they'd boarded your vessel, they would have slaughtered your crew and corrupted your ship. I am designed to fight such threats. Your people are not." Counselor Troy approached from where she'd been observing. "I'm sensing tremendous pain, Lord Commander. You're in agony, yet you're suppressing it through what I can only describe as absolute willpower. Pain is merely chemical signals and nerve impulses, Counselor. I can compartmentalize it, route it through mental disciplines that allow me to function despite injuries that would incapacitate others." But even as he spoke, Guilliman's jaw was clenched, his transhuman face showing strain. "Though I admit, this particular collection of injuries is testing even my tolerance." "Then stop talking and let me work," Crusher ordered with the authority of a doctor who'd long ago learned that rank meant nothing in her sickbay. "I'm going to need to stabilize your lung, repair the damage to your skeletal reinforcement, and seal approximately 47 lacerations that are currently leaking blood at a rate that should have rendered you unconscious." As she worked, Captain Picard entered, followed by Data and Geordi. The captain's expression showed concern mixed with something that might have been respect. "Lord Commander, your actions today saved this ship and crew. On behalf of Starfleet and the Federation, I thank you." "Save your thanks, Captain. I killed 73 beings today, corrupted, yes, but beings nonetheless. Each one was once human before chaos twisted them. Some might have been conscripted, forced into service, victims as much as perpetrators." Guilliman stared at the ceiling. "In the Imperium, we don't distinguish. Chaos corruption is irreversible. The only mercy is death. But I wonder, sometimes, how many innocent souls we've killed because we couldn't save them." "The word-bearers chose their path," Worf said from the doorway, where he'd been standing guard. "They followed Lorgar into heresy. Their damnation was self-inflicted." "Was it? Lorgar was raised on a world that worshipped gods. The Emperor forbade such worship, punished my brother for his faith, and never explained why religion was forbidden. Is it any wonder he turned to beings who welcomed his devotion?" Guilliman's voice carried old pain. "The heresy happened because the Emperor was a terrible father who created sons but refused to treat us as children. He gave us power without guidance, purpose without meaning, and was surprised when half of us fell to chaos. You blame your creator for your brother's betrayal? Data asked, his positronic curiosity engaged. I blame all of us. The Emperor for his hubris. My brothers for their weakness. Myself for not seeing the signs sooner. We all failed, Commander. The heresy was not one betrayal but a cascade of failures that destroyed the dream we were building. Guilliman closed his eyes. And now I fight to preserve the nightmare that dream became, because the alternative is letting humanity die. That's the tragedy of the Imperium. We're trapped maintaining a system we know is broken because we don't know how to build a better one that can survive. Crusher finished sealing the last of his major wounds. You'll need several days of rest to fully recover. Your healing factor is remarkable, but even you have limits. Several days I don't have, Doctor. Those 2 word-bearer ships that escaped will report my presence in this era. Other Chaos warbands will come hunting. Orc warbands might detect the psychic signature of a Primarch and seek a worthy fight. The Eldar might take interest in a temporal anomaly this significant. Guilliman sat up despite Crusher's protests. Captain Picard, I need to leave your vessel. My presence endangers you and your crew. If you'll provide a shuttle and basic supplies, I'll remove myself from Federation space and draw any pursuers away from your territory. Absolutely not, Picard said immediately. You're a refugee who came to us for help. We don't abandon people in need, regardless of how dangerous their presence might be. A noble sentiment that will get your crew killed when the next Chaos warband arrives with more ships and better preparation. Guilliman swung his legs off the biobed, his massive frame making the medical equipment look like children's toys. Captain, I appreciate your principles. Truly. But principles don't stop bolter rounds. Principles don't protect against chaos corruption. Principles don't save lives when facing enemies that view mercy as weakness. Neither does running, Picard countered. Lord Commander, you defeated 3 hostile vessels with minimal support. Imagine what you could accomplish with the full resources of Starfleet behind you. We have scientists who could study the chaos corruption and develop countermeasures. We have engineers who could help you repair and maintain your equipment. We have diplomats who might find ways to address threats without immediate resort to violence. You want to study chaos? Guilliman's expression was horrified. Captain, chaos is not a scientific curiosity to be examined. It's a metaphysical cancer that corrupts everything it touches. Your scientists would be driven mad by what they discovered. Your engineers would be tempted by the dark knowledge they uncovered. Your diplomats would try to negotiate with beings that view mortals as livestock. This is not paranoia, this is 10,000 years of hard-learned wisdom. Then teach us, Data suggested. If chaos represents such a fundamental threat, educate us on how to recognize and resist it. Allow us to learn from your experience so we're prepared if we encounter such phenomena. Guilliman looked at the android for a long moment. You want me to explain the warp, the nature of chaos, the existence of demon entities and the dark gods that rule them. To a civilization that barely believes in psychic phenomena and treats consciousness as an emergent property of biological complexity. We have encountered non-corporeal entities, Picard said. Q, the prophets of Bajorans, beings that exist in subspace or other dimensions. We're not entirely ignorant of realities beyond the physical. Q. Prophets? Guilliman's expression sharpened. Describe these entities. Q is an omnipotent being from a species called the Q continuum. He can manipulate reality at will, appears and disappears without warning, and seems to take interest in testing humanity's development. The prophets are non-linear beings who exist outside conventional time, revered by the Bajoran people as gods. Guilliman absorbed this. Omnipotent reality manipulators and non-linear temporal entities. In the Imperium, we'd classify Q as a warp entity of tremendous power, possibly a demon prince or greater demon not aligned with the 4 major chaos gods. The prophets sound like they might be similar beings operating outside the materium. He ran a hand through his hair, a surprisingly human gesture. The fact that you've encountered such entities and haven't been corrupted or destroyed is remarkable. Either your universe operates on different metaphysical principles, or you're far more resilient than I've given you credit for. Or perhaps, Troy said softly, your Imperium's approach to such beings, assuming all are hostile, refusing all communication, creates the very antagonism you claim is inevitable. A pleasant theory, counselor. Shall we test it by opening communication with a demon of corn? I'm sure if we ask politely, he'll stop trying to kill everyone and sit down for diplomatic negotiations over tea. Guilliman's sarcasm was sharp. Some entities cannot be reasoned with. Chaos is not misunderstood, it's fundamentally hostile to ordered reality. It feeds on negative emotions, grows stronger from suffering, and seeks to unmake the material universe and replace it with the nightmare realm of the warp. There is no compromise with that. Yet you yourself exist partially through warp energies, Data observed. Your father, the Emperor, used what you call warpcraft to create you. How is that different from the chaos you condemn? Because the Emperor wielded the warp without surrendering to it. He used its power as a tool rather than worshipping it as a god. That's the distinction. The Imperium uses psychic phenomena for necessity and treats it with appropriate caution. Chaos worshippers embrace it, invite it, allow it to corrupt them until they're no longer human. Guilliman's voice dropped. But you're right that it's a fine line. The Emperor walked that line, and so do I. Every time I use my enhanced abilities, every time I channel power that shouldn't exist in the Materium, I risk falling. That's the burden of being a Primarch, we're weapons forged from the very forces we fight. The philosophical debate was interrupted by Geordie's combadge chirping. LaForge, this is engineering. Sir, we've got a problem with the sensor arrays. They're picking up spatial distortions consistent with the Lord Commander's arrival pattern. Something else is trying to come through from his universe. Everyone turned to Guilliman, who had gone very still. How many signatures? He asked. Just one. But it's massive. Easily the size of a Galaxy-class starship. Description of the energy pattern. We're reading warp signatures similar to what we detected with your arrival, but wronger. The spatial distortions are more chaotic, less controlled. And Captain, the computer's having trouble maintaining focus on the readings. Like the sensors don't want to look at it. Guilliman stood, ignoring Crusher's protests about his injuries. That's chaos corruption affecting your technology. Whatever's coming through, it's heavily tainted. Captain Picard, you need to get your ship far away from here. Now. What are we facing? I don't know. But if it's large, chaos corrupted, and forcing its way through dimensional barriers, the options are all terrible. Could be a chaos warship. Could be a demon vessel. Could be something from the warp that doesn't even have a physical form but is trying to manifest in your reality. Guilliman moved toward the sickbay exit, still in his damaged armor. I need to see it. If it's what I fear. Then we face it together, Picard said firmly. That's how Starfleet operates, Lord Commander. We don't send people to face threats alone. Even when facing it alone is the logical tactical decision. Especially then. Logic and principles are not always aligned, Lord Commander. And when they conflict, I choose principles. Guilliman studied the captain, this baseline human who commanded with conviction rather than fear, who led through inspiration rather than intimidation. So different from the way the Imperium operated. So different from what Guilliman had become. Then let's go see what fresh nightmare the warp has sent through, Captain. And hope your principles are enough when we're facing something that doesn't recognize their value. They headed for the bridge, and as they walked, Guilliman felt something he hadn't experienced in longer than he could remember. Hope. Not that they would win. Not that principles would triumph over pragmatism. But hope that perhaps, in this era before humanity had learned to hate and fear everything beyond its understanding, there was still a chance to show that strength and compassion could coexist. If they survived the next few hours, anyway. The bridge of the USS Enterprise-D had transformed into a war room. Every console displayed tactical data, sensor readings, and calculations attempting to predict the nature of the threat emerging through dimensional barriers. At the center of it all stood Captain Picard, his command presence anchoring his crew's focus, while beside him stood Roboute Guilliman, 9 feet of transhuman warrior still wearing damaged armor, the Emperor's sword mag-locked to his back and blazing with cold fire that made the bridge lighting flicker. On screen, Picard ordered. The view screen shifted to show space itself tearing open. But this was nothing like the relatively clean dimensional breach that had deposited Guilliman in this universe. This was reality screaming, space writhing and buckling, colors that shouldn't exist bleeding through from somewhere else, and within the chaos, something vast and terrible taking shape. Reading massive energy signatures, data reported from Ops, his positronic brain processing data that was making the Enterprise's computers stutter and crash. However, the readings are inconsistent. The object appears to exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously. It is both matter and energy, both present and absent, both. He paused, his synthetic features showing something that might have been confusion. Captain, the computer is suggesting the object is simultaneously a starship, a living creature, and a mathematical impossibility. That's chaos corruption, Guilliman said, his voice carrying grim certainty. It's a vessel from the warp, where the laws of physics are suggestions and reality itself is malleable. What you're seeing is something that exists partially in the materium and partially in the immaterium, straddling the boundary between dimensions. The thing emerging from the rift was massive, easily matching the Enterprise's 642-meter length, but its shape defied conventional starship design. It looked organic and mechanical simultaneously, as if metal had been grown rather than forged, as if engines had been birthed rather than built. Spires jutted from its hull at impossible angles. Surfaces shifted and changed color like diseased flesh. And across its structure, symbols had been carved or grown, 8-pointed stars, blasphemous runes, imagery that made human eyes want to look away. I'm detecting life signs, Worf reported, his Klingon warrior instincts screaming danger. Hundreds of them. But the readings are wrong. Some register as human. Others as something else. And several appear to be both simultaneously. Chaos cultists and possessed crew, Guilliman said. Captain, that is a chaos warship, likely a heavily corrupted Imperial vessel that fell to the ruinous powers during a campaign and has been operating in chaos-held regions ever since. Its crew will be a mixture of corrupted humans, demons wearing human flesh, and beings that stopped being human so long ago they've forgotten what sanity felt like. They're hailing us, the communications officer reported, his voice unsteady. Don't answer it, Guilliman said immediately. Chaos cultists speak in tongues designed to corrupt the listener. Their words carry warp taint that can influence the weak-willed, plant seeds of doubt, inspire forbidden desires. Even hearing their voice is dangerous. We can't simply refuse communication, Picard argued. Perhaps they can be reasoned with. Captain, with all due respect, that is exactly the kind of thinking that has damned entire worlds. Chaos does not negotiate in good faith. Every word is manipulation, every promise is poison, every offer is a trap. Guilliman moved to the view screen, studying the warship with transhuman visual acuity that could detect details impossible for baseline human eyes. That vessel bears the marks of the Alpha Legion, my brother Alfarius's traitor marines, masters of deception and infiltration. If they're hailing you, it's not for diplomacy. It's to analyze your responses, identify weaknesses, and determine the best method to corrupt or destroy you. Then what do you suggest? Riker asked. Full power to shields. Charge all weapons. Prepare for combat. And hope your technology is sufficient to damage a ship that doesn't entirely exist in your physical dimension. Guilliman's jaw was set. Though I suspect it won't be. Chaos vessels are protected by warp sorcery that can turn aside physical weapons and shrug off energy attacks. Then how do you fight them? Geordi demanded from engineering stations. Faith. Determination. The absolute conviction that you will not fall to their corruption no matter what they offer. Guilliman's hand moved to the Emperor's sword. And when faith isn't enough, you use weapons forged to kill demons and burn warp-touched matter back to the hell it came from. Unfortunately, I only have one such weapon, and it's designed for close combat, not ship-to-ship engagement. The Chaos warship completed its emergence, the dimensional rift sealing behind it with a sound that registered on audio sensors as something between a scream and laughter. The vessel hung in space like a tumor, its presence making the stars around it seem dimmer, as if it was absorbing light itself. "Captain, they're charging weapons," Worf reported. "Multiple energy signatures building across their hull. I'm reading configurations consistent with plasma cannons, lance batteries, and something else I cannot identify." "Warp lightning," Guilliman supplied. "Raw immaterium energy projected into the materium. It bypasses conventional shields and burns through reality itself. If that hits your hull." The Chaos warship fired. Multiple beams of sickly green energy lanced across space, moving faster than conventional weapons should allow. The Enterprise's shields flared as they attempted to deflect the attack, but Guilliman could see what the crew could not. The warp lightning wasn't being stopped, merely slowed. It was eating through the deflector shields like acid through flesh. Shields at 73% and falling rapidly. Worf called out. "Captain, their weapons are degrading our defensive matrix." "Another hit like that." "Evasive maneuvers," Picard ordered. "Return fire, all weapons." The Enterprise banked hard for a Galaxy-class starship, its impulse engine straining as it maneuvered to avoid the next volley. Phaser arrays fired in coordinated bursts, golden beams striking the Chaos warship's hull and, sliding off. The energy simply dispersed across the vessel's surface, absorbed by warp sorcery that treated physics as optional. "Our weapons are ineffective," Data reported. "The hostile vessel appears to be protected by an energy field that operates on principles outside our understanding of defensive technology." "Because it's not technology, it's sorcery," Guilliman growled. "Chaos sorcerers aboard that ship are channeling warp energy to create protective barriers. Your phasers use directed energy based on predictable physics. Their shields operate on belief and will made manifest. Then how do we fight it?" Picard demanded, his ship taking another hit that dropped shields to 54%. Guilliman made a decision that violated every Codex Astartes principle, every tactical doctrine he'd spent centuries perfecting. "You don't." "I do. Beam me onto that ship, Captain. I'll sabotage it from within." "That's the same plan you used against the word-bearers, and you barely survived." "I barely survived because I wasn't expecting resistance that organized. This time I know what I'm facing." Guilliman was already moving toward the turbolift. "Captain, that vessel will destroy your ship within 10 minutes. Your only chance is if I board them and eliminate their command structure before they can coordinate another assault. I am a Primarch. I was designed to face impossible odds. Let me do what I was made for." "I'm going with you," Worf said immediately, following Guilliman. "Lieutenant, you would die within seconds." "Then I die with honor, fighting alongside a warrior worthy of respect." Worf's Klingon pride was absolute. "You spoke of duty and sacrifice, Lord Commander. Do not deny me mine." Guilliman looked at the Klingon, seeing something of himself in that absolute conviction, that warrior's code that valued honor over survival. "Very well. But you follow my orders without question, and if I tell you to retreat, you retreat." "Understood." "Understood." Picard wanted to protest, wanted to argue that there had to be another way, but the Enterprise shuddered under another warp lightning strike, shields now at 38%, and he knew they were out of time and options. "Mr. Data, prepare to transport Lord Commander Guilliman and Lieutenant Worf to the hostile vessel on my mark." "Mr. Worf, return alive." "That's an order." "I will do my best, Captain." Worf gripped his bat'leth with the certainty of a warrior who knew he might be heading to his death but went anyway because duty demanded it. In the transporter room, Guilliman performed final checks on his armor while O'Brien worked the controls with shaking hands. The chief engineer had transported countless people across impossible distances, but never to certain death aboard a chaos-corrupted vessel from a timeline that shouldn't exist. "Lord Commander," O'Brien said as he calibrated the targeting scanners, "I don't know much about your chaos entities, but I know they're dangerous. Come back, sir. For what it's worth, this crew would like to see you again." "Chief O'Brien, if I don't return, tell Captain Picard that he's everything a leader should be, principled without being naive, strong without being brutal, idealistic without being foolish. The Imperium could have learned much from him." Guilliman drew the Emperor's sword, and its flames blazed brighter, as if sensing the coming battle. "And tell him that I hope the Federation never has to make the choices the Imperium made. That his future proves kinder than mine." "You can tell him yourself when you get back," O'Brien said firmly. Guilliman and Worf took positions on the transporter pad. The Primarch towered over the Klingon, 9 feet of ceramite armor and transhuman fury, while Worf stood ready with bat'leth in hand and Klingon prayers on his lips. "Energize," Guilliman commanded. They materialized directly into hell. The interior of the Chaos warship was a nightmare made manifest. Corridors twisted at impossible angles. Walls wept blood or worse substances. The air was thick with incense that smelled of burning flesh and something sweet that made the hindbrain scream danger. Symbols covered every surface, 8-pointed stars, runes that hurt to look at, imagery of serpents and eyes and other things that defied categorization. And the crew. They had once been human. Some still resembled humans, though their flesh bore mutations, extra eyes, too many teeth, limbs that bent in wrong directions. Others had transcended humanity entirely, becoming things of tentacles and chitin and psychic screaming. And among them walked beings that were clearly demons, entities from the warp wearing physical forms like ill-fitting clothes, their true nature visible as auras of wrongness that made reality ripple around them. 50 enemies. At least. All turning to face the intruders with weapons raised and chaos prayers on their corrupted tongues. For the Emperor. Guilliman roared, and charged into battle with the Emperor's sword blazing like a sun. Worf followed, bat'leth raised, and discovered what it meant to fight alongside a demigod. Guilliman was a storm of violence, every movement economical, every strike lethal, every tactical decision made in microseconds and executed with perfect precision. The Emperor's sword cut through chaos-corrupted flesh and demon essence with equal ease, its holy fire burning away taint and sending entities screaming back to the warp. A cultist raised a plasma pistol. Guilliman's bolt pistol barked once, and the cultist's head exploded in a spray of gore. A possessed marine lunged with warp claws extended. The Emperor's sword took its arm at the shoulder, then reversed to take its head. A demon of Tsench attempted to manifest, reality warping around it. Guilliman's faith, absolute conviction in his father's vision, drove it back before it could fully materialize. Worf fought beside him, his bat'leth singing as it struck cultist after cultist. But he was quickly learning the difference between fighting honorable warriors and fighting chaos. His enemies didn't care about honor. They attacked from behind, from the sides, with poison blades and warp sorcery. Only Guilliman's tactical guidance kept him alive. Left side, 2 cultists with flommers. Guilliman called out without looking, his enhanced senses tracking every threat simultaneously. Forward thrust, don't give them time to fire. Worf struck as commanded, his blade finding throats before the cultists could unleash Promethean flames. They fought through corridors that shouldn't exist, following Guilliman's tactical instincts toward what he identified as the command deck. Bodies piled in their wake, cultists, demons, corrupted crew who had once been loyal Imperial servants before chaos claimed them. And through it all, Guilliman felt the weight of every kill. These had been humans once. Perhaps not good humans, perhaps corrupted beyond redemption, but humans nonetheless. And he was killing them because that's what the galaxy had made necessary. They reached the bridge, a vast chamber where reality itself seemed negotiable. The walls shifted color. The ceiling showed impossible stars. And at the center, seated on a throne of bones and screaming faces, was the ship's master. He wore power armor of deep purple and green, marked with the Hydra symbol of the Alpha Legion. His helmet bore 3 eyes instead of 2. And when he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that suggested multiple beings speaking in unison. Roboute Guilliman. Lord of Corpses. Servant of the false emperor. You come aboard our vessel wearing your father's delusions like armor. But we know the truth. We have always known the truth. I am Guilliman, son of the emperor, and I will cleanse this vessel of your taint, traitor. The Primarch advanced, sword blazing. Then come, loyalist. Let us see if faith in a corpse god is sufficient against the blessings of the primordial truth. The Alpha Legion Chaos Lord rose from his throne, and the battle for the ship's fate began. The Chaos Lord moved with the enhanced speed of a space marine, but his movements carried unnatural fluidity, as if his body didn't quite obey normal physics. He drew a power sword that crackled with warp lightning, its blade shifting between solid metal and semi-translucent energy. I am Arcos the Faithless, the Chaos Lord declared, his 3-eyed helmet fixed on Guilliman. I have walked the paths of the labyrinth. I have drunk from the well of eternity. I have seen the truth that your father hides, that gods are real, that chaos is inevitable, and that the Imperium's resistance is nothing but the death throes of a failed vision. I've heard these speeches before, traitor. Every chaos champion believes they've discovered some profound truth. In reality, you've simply traded one form of slavery for another, except your new masters are far crueler than the Emperor ever was. Guilliman advanced, the Emperor's sword held in a guard position that suggested centuries of mastery. Spare me the theology and fight. Arcos laughed, a sound that echoed with too many voices. As you wish, Primarch. Let us see if the Emperor's finest creation can stand against the gifts of the dark gods. They clashed in the center of the bridge, power sword against relic blade, transhuman warrior against chaos-enhanced marine. The impact sent shockwaves through the deck, cracking bulkheads and shattering view screens. Guilliman's strength was immense, but Arcos had been empowered by entities that existed outside reality's normal constraints. Worf found himself immediately beset by the bridge crew, corrupted servitors, possessed crew members, and 2 lesser demons that had manifested when the fighting began. His bat'leth was a blur of motion, striking down enemies with Klingon precision, but he was being pushed back, overwhelmed by numbers and chaos-enhanced opponents. Lieutenant, target the bridge controls. Guilliman called out between sword strikes. Disable their weapon systems. Worf fought his way toward a command console, his blade cutting through a possessed crewman whose body erupted with tentacles even as it died. He reached the controls and began striking critical systems with his bat'leth, smashing displays and severing power conduits. On the Enterprise's bridge, Data reported, Captain, the hostile vessel's weapons output is decreasing. I am detecting multiple systems failures across their infrastructure. Whatever Lord Commander Guilliman is doing, it's working, Riker observed. But their shields are still holding, and we're down to 22% shield strength. Maintain evasive maneuvers and continue firing, Picard ordered. Give them every possible advantage. Back on the Chaos Warship's bridge, Guilliman and Arcos fought with a fury that transcended normal combat. The Emperor's sword blazed with holy fire, each strike burning away warp corruption wherever it touched. But Arcos's power sword channeled chaos energy that ate at reality itself, creating brief tears in space where the 2 blades met. You cling to the Emperor's vision, Arcos hissed, his triple-eyed helm close enough that Guilliman could see the madness writhing behind the lenses. But we have seen the future, Guilliman. We have walked the timelines. The Imperium falls. Chaos rises. Your father's corpse will finally rot, and humanity will kneel before the true powers. I've spent 10,000 years hearing prophecies of the Imperium's doom, Guilliman countered, driving Arcos back with a combination of strikes that would have killed a baseline human 10 times over. And yet we endure. We survive. We persist despite everything you and your dark masters throw at us. That's not prophecy failing, that's humanity refusing to submit. Stubborn. Admirable. Futile. Arcos gestured with his free hand, and reality warped. The deck beneath Guilliman's feet became liquid, grasping at his armored boots like quicksand. Demonic faces formed in the metal, screaming soundlessly. Guilliman's faith, absolute conviction in the Emperor's vision, burned the warp manifestation away like morning sun burning fog. Your sorcery is impressive, traitor. But you face a son of the Emperor. I was created with warpcraft, forged in the Imperium itself. Your parlor tricks don't frighten me. He pressed his attack, driving Arcos across the bridge. But the Chaos Lord was adapting, his chaos-enhanced physiology learning Guilliman's combat patterns, predicting his strikes. It was the fundamental problem with fighting Chaos Marines. They had centuries or millennia of experience, enhanced by warp gifts that made them more than human. Worf had finished sabotaging the weapon systems and now fought his way back to Guilliman's side, his bat'leth dripping with blood and worse fluids. Lord Commander, I count 17 hostiles remaining, not including your opponent. We are outnumbered. Then we fight smarter, not harder. Guilliman's tactical mind was already working. Lieutenant, when I give the signal, trigger the bridge's emergency venting protocols. It will evacuate the atmosphere, the cultists and demons will be expelled into space. We'll survive in our armor for the time needed. Understood. Worf fought his way back toward the environmental controls, his Klingon endurance pushed to its limit by the sustained combat. Arcos caught the exchange and laughed. You think depressurization will stop us? We are beyond such mortal concerns. The warp sustains us. Then you won't mind if I test that theory. Guilliman feinted high, struck low, and when Arcos's guard opened for a microsecond, drove the Emperor's sword through his opponent's left knee joint, the weakest point in Space Marine armor. The Chaos Lord stumbled, and Guilliman used that opening to strike Arcos's helmet with the pommel of his sword. The three-eyed helm cracked, and something that wasn't entirely blood leaked from the fracture. Now, Lieutenant. Worf struck the emergency controls, and the bridge explosively decompressed. Atmosphere roared out through opening vents, carrying with it the unprepared cultists, possessed crew, and lesser demons. They tumbled into space, their bodies either freezing or combusting depending on their particular chaos mutations. But Arcos remained, maglocked to the deck, his damaged armor systems keeping him anchored. And Guilliman, in the armor of fate, stood firm against the hurricane of escaping atmosphere. In the silence of vacuum, they fought without sound, only the vibrations through deck plating and the visual fury of blade against blade. Guilliman pressed his advantage, the Emperor's sword a blazing arc of holy fire that left trails in the thin remaining atmosphere. Arcos fought with the desperation of someone who'd been promised immortality by chaos and was discovering that even demon-granted gifts had limits. His power sword flickered as the warp energies sustaining it struggled against the Emperor's holy flame. Finally, Guilliman saw his opening. Arcos overextended on a thrust, confident in chaos-enhanced reflexes. But Guilliman was a Primarch, created by the greatest mind humanity had ever produced, enhanced beyond even the Space Marines that were themselves transhuman. He was faster. The Emperor's sword took Arcos's sword arm at the elbow. The Chaos Lord's scream was silent in vacuum but visible in how his body convulsed. Guilliman didn't give him time to recover, the return stroke took his head, holy fire consuming chaos corruption as the traitor's body collapsed. But even in death, Arcos had one final spite. His body erupted with warp energy, a death curse triggered by his masters. Reality cracked around the corpse, a brief portal opening to the Imperium. Demons began to claw their way through, and Guilliman realized the trap he'd fallen into. Arcos had never expected to win. He'd expected to die and become a sacrifice, a blood offering that would allow a demonic incursion aboard a vessel already weakened by combat. Lieutenant Worf. Guilliman's Vox-amplified voice cut through the vacuum. Get to the escape pods now. This ship is about to become a demon portal. I will not abandon. That's an order. Tell Captain Picard what happened here. Warn him about chaos. Guilliman was already moving toward the emerging demon horde, Emperor's sword blazing with power he hadn't called upon before. Go. Worf hesitated for a fraction of a second, Klingon honor warring with military discipline and the knowledge that someone needed to survive to report. Then he ran, his magnetic boots carrying him toward the escape pod bays. Guilliman faced the demonic incursion alone. They came through in waves, lesser demons of Tsench, all eyes and tentacles and warped geometry. Pink horrors that split into blue horrors when destroyed. Flammers that breathed warp fire that could burn souls. And behind them, something larger was trying to force its way through, a greater demon, a lord of change, a being of pure chaos that could reshape reality with a thought. By the throne, Guilliman whispered, channeling every ounce of faith he possessed into the Emperor's sword. Let the traitors know the price of their heresy. He waded into the demon horde like an avenging angel, the Emperor's sword cutting through warp entities with each strike. Holy fire consumed demonic essence, sending creatures screaming back to the Imperium. But for every demon destroyed, 2 more clawed through the portal. On the Enterprise, Data's console lit up with impossible readings. Captain, the hostile vessel is experiencing catastrophic dimensional instability. I'm detecting energy signatures consistent with. I cannot properly categorize them. They don't conform to known physics. Lord Commander Guilliman. Picard demanded. I'm detecting Lieutenant Worf's combadge signature in a small escape craft launching from the hostile vessel, Data reported. But I cannot locate Lord Commander Guilliman's signal. The escape pod shot away from the Chaos warship just as the vessel began to tear itself apart. Not from mechanical failure, but from the warp energies consuming it from within. The ship became a beacon of impossible light, reality cracking around it like glass under stress. Get a tractor beam on that escape pod. Picard ordered. And get us away from that ship, maximum warp, now. The Enterprise jumped to warp just as the Chaos vessel exploded, not in fire, but in a cascade of dimensional energy that sent shockwaves through subspace itself. The portal to the warp collapsed violently, and anything that had been aboard the ship was either consumed by the explosion or sucked back into the Imperium. They pulled Worf aboard in the transporter room. The Klingon was injured, multiple lacerations, one arm broken, his bat'leth cracked from the brutal combat. But he was alive. Lieutenant Worf, report, Picard said, having rushed down from the bridge. Where is Lord Commander Guilliman? Worf's expression was pained, not from his injuries, but from what he had to report. He remained behind. The ship was becoming a portal for demon entities. He ordered me to evacuate while he held them back. The Klingon's voice carried rare emotion. He died so that I could escape. So that I could warn you. He died with honor, Captain. Fighting impossible odds to protect those who could not protect themselves. The observation lounge fell silent. Dr. Crusher's hand stilled over her medical tricorder. Riker closed his eyes briefly. Data's posture suggested the android equivalent of grief. Captain Picard felt the weight of command settle heavier on his shoulders. They'd known Roboute Guilliman for less than a week, but in that time, the Primarch had saved their ship twice, challenged their assumptions, and demonstrated what it meant to bear the burden of impossible duty. He was a warrior, Worf said quietly. The greatest I have ever known. He fought without honor by Klingon standards, but with a code far more demanding, the code of absolute duty. He sacrificed everything, including his life, because he believed humanity's survival demanded it. Captain, Data said from the science station, I should note that we have no confirmed destruction of Lord Commander Guilliman. The energy signatures from the vessel's explosion were too chaotic to distinguish individual biosigns. It is theoretically possible. He's gone, Commander, Picard said heavily. And we must honor his sacrifice by remembering his warnings and his lessons. Counselor Troy, please compose a report on everything Lord Commander Guilliman told us about his era, the threats he described, and the choices humanity faces. We may not be able to prevent the future he came from, but we can at least try to understand what led to it. As the crew dispersed to their duties, all carrying the weight of loss, none of them saw the small temporal anomaly that flickered into existence near the site of the Chaos ship's destruction. And none of them detected the single armored figure that materialized in the debris field, his armor cracked and his body wounded beyond what should have been survivable, floating in space as his transhuman physiology fought desperately to keep him alive. Roboute Guilliman was not dead. But whether he would survive long enough to be rescued was another question entirely. 3 days passed aboard the USS Enterprise-D. 3 days of grief, reflection, and the crew processing the loss of a warrior they'd barely known but who had fundamentally changed their perspective on duty, sacrifice, and the cost of survival. Captain Picard stood in his ready room, reading Counselor Troy's comprehensive report on Roboute Guilliman's accounts of the 42nd millennium. The Imperium of Man. The Chaos Gods. The endless wars against Xeno species. The brutality required, or believed to be required, for humanity's survival. Every page challenged the Federation's core assumptions about progress, civilization, and the inevitability of enlightenment. The door chimed. "Come." Lieutenant Commander Data entered, his golden eyes reflecting the desk lamp's glow. "Captain, I have completed my analysis of the sensor data from the Chaos vessel's destruction. There are anomalies I believe you should see." Picard gestured to the chair across from him. "Proceed." The dimensional explosion that destroyed the hostile vessel created subspace distortions that persisted for 2.7 seconds after the initial detonation. During that window, I detected a brief energy signature consistent with a transporter beam, not Federation technology, but similar in principle to what Lord Commander Guilliman described as Imperial teleportation systems. Picard sat forward. "You're suggesting he escaped?" "I'm suggesting someone or something transported from the vessel's location immediately before complete structural collapse. Whether it was Lord Commander Guilliman, a chaos entity, or some other phenomenon, I cannot determine with available data." Data's expression suggested the android equivalent of uncertainty. "However, I have been monitoring long-range sensors for any sign of his biosignature. 3 hours ago, we detected a faint energy reading consistent with the armor of Fate's power systems approximately 200,000 kilometers from the explosion site. Why wasn't I informed immediately? Because I could not confirm it was him, Captain. The signature was weak and intermittent, as if the power source was failing. I did not wish to raise hopes that might prove unfounded." Data pulled up a star chart. "However, the signature has remained stationary for the past 3 hours. If it is Lord Commander Guilliman, he may be injured and unable to signal for assistance." Picard was already moving. "Bridge, this is the captain. Set course for coordinates. Mr. Data is uploading. Maximum warp. And get a medical team standing by in Transporter Room 3. They found him floating in the debris field from the Chaos ship's destruction, his massive armored form tumbling slowly in zero gravity, surrounded by twisted metal that had once been a vessel and was now monument to Chaos's defeat. The armor of Fate was catastrophically damaged, ceramite plating cracked and torn away in sections, one arm hanging limp, the power systems flickering on the edge of total failure. The Emperor's sword was still mag-locked to his back, though its holy flames had dimmed to barely visible embers. Reading faint life signs, Dr. Crusher reported from sickbay, monitoring the sensors. His vital signs are critical but stable. Both hearts are beating, but barely. Captain, we need to get him aboard immediately. His armor's life support is failing. Energize. Roboute Guilliman materialized on the transporter pad in a shower of sparks from his damaged armor. The moment he was aboard, Crusher's medical team swarmed him with scanners, hyposprays, and emergency equipment. "Get that armor off him," Crusher ordered. "His biosigns are crashing, he's been in vacuum for hours with failing life support." Geordi and his engineering team worked frantically to disconnect the neural interfaces and remove the ceramite plating. When they finally peeled away the breastplate, they found Guilliman's body covered in burns, lacerations, and evidence of warp exposure that had scarred his transhuman flesh in ways that made Crusher's medical training feel inadequate. "How is he alive?" one of the medical technicians whispered. "Primarch physiology," Crusher said, her hand steady despite her shock. "His body is shutting down non-essential functions to preserve brain activity and core organs. He's in a form of hibernation, his metabolism has slowed to almost nothing. She administered a hypospray of stimulants designed to jumpstart his systems. But even he has limits. Much longer out there, and not even transhuman biology could have saved him." They transported him directly to sickbay's surgical bay, where Crusher spent the next 6 hours repairing damage that would have killed a baseline human 100 times over. Warp burns that had seared tissue at the molecular level. Broken bones that his ceramic reinforcement had barely kept from fragmenting completely. Internal bleeding from organs that shouldn't exist in human anatomy. And neurological trauma from exposure to demonic energies that had tried to corrupt him even as he fought to survive. When she finally emerged from surgery, Crusher found Captain Picard waiting with his senior staff. "He'll live," she said without preamble. "His healing factor is already starting to repair the damage we couldn't." "But Captain, what he survived shouldn't be survivable. The warp exposure alone should have killed him, driven him mad, or worse. That he's still sane, still himself, it speaks to either incredible willpower or something in his Primarch nature that makes him resistant to chaos corruption." "When will he wake?" Picard asked. "Hours. Maybe days. His body needs time to heal." Crusher looked exhausted. "But sir, when he does wake, we need to talk about what happens next. He can't keep fighting like this. His body may be transhuman, but it's not indestructible. Eventually, even Primarchs run out of miracles." Picard nodded. "Agreed. When he wakes, we'll have a discussion about the future, his and ours." 18 hours later, Roboute Guilliman opened his eyes in a sickbay bed that was too small for him, surrounded by medical equipment that beeped steadily, in a universe that wasn't his own. Dr. Crusher was at his side immediately. "Lord Commander, don't try to move. You've sustained severe injuries and..." "How long?" Guilliman's voice was a rasp, his throat raw from exposure to vacuum. "You've been unconscious for 18 hours. Your body is healing, but you need rest." "How many casualties aboard the Enterprise?" Crusher blinked, thrown by the question. "None. You drew the Chaos Force's attention entirely. Lieutenant Worf escaped in time to warn us, and we jumped to warp before the vessel's destruction could damage us." Guilliman closed his eyes briefly. "Good. That's good." He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain lanced through his torso. "The Emperor's sword?" "Secured in engineering. It's undamaged, the blade is still burning with that cold fire. Mr. LaForge says it's remarkable. The flames don't consume fuel, don't produce heat, they just exist. It's a relic from a time when humanity could bind the warp to our will rather than being consumed by it." Guilliman accepted Crusher's assistance in sitting up, his transhuman pride warring with his body's weakness. "Doctor, I need to speak with Captain Picard. There are things he needs to know about what I encountered on that ship. You need rest." "I've been resting for 10,000 years in stasis, Doctor. Rest is a luxury I can't afford." But his voice softened. "Though I appreciate your concern. You're a skilled physician. The Imperium would be blessed to have Medici with your competence and compassion." Picard arrived within minutes, followed by his senior staff. They gathered around Guilliman's sickbay bed, this being of legend and nightmare who had saved their ship twice and died, or nearly died, both times. "Lord Commander," Picard said warmly. "I'm pleased to see you alive. We feared we'd lost you. You nearly did. The demon incursion was worse than I anticipated. Arcos the Faithless was a true believer, his death was meant to create a portal large enough for a greater demon to manifest. If I hadn't managed to disrupt the ritual. Guilliman's expression was haunted. Well. Let's just say your universe would have gained an entity capable of warping reality on a planetary scale. That couldn't be allowed. How did you escape? Data asked, his curiosity engaged. I didn't. Not entirely. When the warp portal collapsed, it created a brief moment of temporal flux. Time itself became negotiable. In that microsecond, I channeled every ounce of my Primarch nature, my connection to the warp through my father's creation, and essentially teleported through the collapsing portal using principles I don't fully understand. Guilliman ran a hand through his hair. It should have killed me. By all rights, it did kill me. But Primarchs are hard to kill permanently. We're weapons designed to survive what would destroy others. And now? Riker asked. What happens now? Guilliman looked at each of them in turn, Picard with his principled command, Data with his synthetic curiosity, Crusher with her medical compassion, Worf with his warrior's honor, Troy with her empathic understanding. Now, Captain, I believe we need to have a serious conversation about the future. Both yours and mine. They moved to the observation lounge at Picard's suggestion, neutral ground where they could speak candidly without the clinical atmosphere of sickbay. Guilliman walked slowly, his body still healing, but his presence no less commanding for the injuries. Lord Commander, Picard began once they were seated, you've now been in our era for nearly 2 weeks. You've saved this ship twice. You've shared knowledge about humanity's potential future that challenges everything the Federation believes. And you've nearly died multiple times fighting threats we didn't believe existed. The question is, what do you want to do next? Guilliman was quiet for a long moment, his transhuman mind processing possibilities, consequences, futures. What I want and what I can do are different things, Captain. I want to return to my era, to continue fighting for the Imperium despite all its flaws. But the warp rift that brought me here is closed. I have no navigator to guide me through the Imperium. I have no Geller field to protect me from chaos corruption during transit. And even if I could return, I'd be traveling forward through time, 38,000 years forward, with no guarantee I'd arrive at the moment I left. So you're stranded here, Crusher said softly. Essentially, yes. Which means I must adapt to this era and decide what role I can serve in a universe that doesn't need a weapon designed to conquer galaxies. Guilliman met Picard's eyes. Captain, you've shown me what humanity can become when it doesn't have to fight for survival every moment. Your Federation has achieved something I thought impossible, peace without weakness, strength without brutality, principles without naivete. It's everything my father wanted the Imperium to be. But you still believe we're unprepared for the threats you've described, Picard observed. I believe you're unprepared for the scale of existential threat the galaxy can produce. You've faced the Borg, the Dominion, hostile species. But you haven't faced chaos, corruption that spreads through belief, that turns your greatest virtues into weapons against you, that treats your principles as vulnerabilities to exploit. Guilliman leaned forward. However, I've also learned that my approach, assume everything is hostile, destroy all threats preemptively, never trust or negotiate, has costs you've made me reconsider. Perhaps there is wisdom in your methods that the Imperium forgot. Perhaps I can learn from you, even as I warn you about what might come. You're proposing an exchange of knowledge, Data said. I'm proposing an alliance. I share everything I know about chaos, about how to recognize corruption and resist it, about the threats the Imperium has catalogued over 10,000 years. In exchange, you share your knowledge of peaceful coexistence, diplomatic resolution, and how to maintain principles under pressure. Perhaps together, we can forge an approach that combines your idealism with my pragmatism. And what would you do here? Riker asked. Join Starfleet. Guilliman actually smiled, small, but genuine. A Primarch in a Starfleet uniform. My brothers would mock me for eternity if they could see that. But yes, Commander. If Captain Picard and the Federation would have me, I would serve as advisor on existential threats, consultant on strategic doctrine, and He hesitated. Perhaps someone who can remind you all that while principles are worth preserving, survival is the prerequisite for any principle to matter. And we can remind you, Picard said quietly, that survival without principles isn't worth achieving. That humanity can endure without becoming monsters. That the cost of victory should never be our own humanity. A fair trade, Captain. They talked for hours, about the Imperium, about the Federation, about the philosophical gulf between 40K's grim pragmatism and Trek's enlightened optimism. They debated the Prime Directive versus the Imperium's interventionism. They discussed the Borg versus chaos as existential threats. They explored whether humanity's future was inevitably the nightmare Guilliman described or if different choices could lead to different outcomes. And slowly, as the hours passed, something remarkable happened. Guilliman began to accept that his way wasn't the only way. And Picard's crew began to understand that their principles, while admirable, might need reinforcement when facing truly implacable threats. "I will never become what the Imperium has made me," Guilliman said finally. "But neither will I demand you become what I was." Perhaps the answer lies between, strong enough to survive, principled enough to be worth surviving for. "Then welcome to the Federation, Lord Commander Guilliman," Picard said, extending his hand. "We'll learn from each other. And perhaps together, we'll forge a path that honors both survival and principle." Guilliman shook his hand, and in that moment, two visions of humanity's future, one dark and brutal, one bright and idealistic, met and acknowledged that truth lay somewhere between. 3 months later, Captain's Log, Stardate 47392.1. Lord Commander Roboute Guilliman has been officially designated as Starfleet's Special Advisor on Existential Threats, with the rank of Fleet Commander, a position created specifically for his unique expertise. He has begun training programs on chaos recognition, delivered lectures on strategic doctrine to the Academy, and proven himself invaluable in diplomatic situations where his experience with hostile species provides perspective we previously lacked. More importantly, he has become part of this ship's family. Worf trains with him daily and has begun to understand that honor and pragmatism can coexist. Data engages him in philosophical discussions about consciousness, duty, and what it means to be more than human. Dr. Crusher has learned volumes about transhuman medicine. And I have learned that strength and principles need not be enemies. The question remains, will his presence in our era change the future he came from? Or will we succeed in creating a different future entirely? Only time will tell. But as Lord Commander Guilliman recently observed, the future is not written in stone. It's written in the choices we make today. And today, I choose to believe that humanity can do better than the nightmare I left behind. I find myself sharing that hope. End log. On the bridge, Roboute Guilliman stood at a custom tactical station designed for his height, monitoring sensors alongside Worf. He wore a modified Starfleet uniform, red and black with gold command trim, adjusted for his massive frame, but his Emperor's sword remained at his side, a reminder of where he'd come from and what he'd fought for. "Incoming transmission from Starfleet Command," the communications officer reported. "Admiral Nechayev wishes to speak with you and the Lord Commander, Captain." Picard and Guilliman exchanged glances. "Put her through." Admiral Nechayev's stern face appeared on the view screen. "Captain Picard." "Lord Commander. I'm contacting you because we've detected unusual subspace readings near the Romulan neutral zone, readings consistent with the dimensional distortions that accompanied Lord Commander Guilliman's arrival. We believe another entity may be attempting to cross over from his universe." Guilliman's expression hardened. Description of the energy signature: chaotic, unstable. And our analysts believe they detected what they're describing as screaming in the subspace frequencies. "That's a warp storm," Guilliman said immediately. "And if something's coming through it." He looked at Picard. "Captain, with your permission, I recommend we investigate. If another chaos incursion is beginning, the Federation needs to know what it's facing before it's too late." Picard nodded. "Helm, set course for the neutral zone. Maximum warp." Lord Commander, prepare a briefing on chaos containment procedures. It seems your expertise is already being called upon. As the Enterprise jumped to warp, racing toward whatever new threat was emerging from the grim darkness of the 42nd millennium, Roboute Guilliman allowed himself a grim smile. He had found purpose in this era. Not as a conqueror or destroyer, but as a teacher, advisor, and bridge between two visions of humanity's future. The Emperor had created him to be a weapon. But perhaps, in this universe, he could be something more. Something better. A guardian who remembered that the people he protected were not just strategic assets to be preserved, but sentient beings whose dreams and hopes and principles were worth fighting for, not despite their idealism, but because of it. All hands, this is Captain Picard. We're approaching the neutral zone to investigate a potential transdimensional incursion. Lord Commander Guilliman will be providing tactical guidance. Whatever we're about to face, we'll face it together, with strength, principles, and the determination that defines the Federation. Picard out. Guilliman's hand rested on the Emperor's sword, and its flames blazed brighter, as if sensing the coming storm. In the grim darkness of the 42nd millennium, he murmured, "There is only war." But here, in the light of the 24th century, perhaps there can be something more. Let's prove it. And the USS Enterprise-D, carrying a Primarch from humanity's distant future and a crew determined to show him that hope could triumph over darkness, raced toward the next chapter in an alliance that would challenge everything both eras believed about duty, survival, and the cost of civilization. The adventure had only just begun. Live long and prosper. Hit the subscribe button for more interesting stories.